Okay. Good evening, everyone. I want to take this opportunity to start our meeting tonight. Can I have a motion to reopen our meeting? So moved by Commissioner Frank. Can I get a second? Oh, Commissioner Brooks, all in favor? Can you say your name?
McFadden.
Richardson? Okay, thank you. That's six votes? With 4 absent. Thank you. I'd like to call to order and have the presentation of colors by the JROTC, Patterson High School.
Left, color guard, up, left, face. Ma'am, Lieutenant Colonel Simmons from Patterson High School, MD 932, Lieutenant Corps, requesting permission to post the colors, ma'am.
Permission granted.
Thank you, ma'am. Colors reverse, march. Color guard, up. Present, arms. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
order, arms. Colors, post. Color guard, up. Ready, cut.
Thank you. I'd like to recognize our students from Patterson High School. That was Cadet Ashlyn Simmons, Cadet Dale Vester, Cadet Denoy Hamilton, and Cadet Lanisha Parrish. And our student performers from Booker T. Washington Middle School Orchid Brass Band, led by Mr. Jarrett Perry. We had Kayla Missouri, Cortez Williams, Jasmine Holden, Jana Sims, Isaiah Magruder, Andre and Aaron Palmer, Carter Griffin, Cliff Wilson, Kayamia McClinton, Dwayne Johnson, Nyasha Boxdale, and Sanaya Tyson. Let's please give our students another round of applause. At this time, I want to get an approval for our prior open session minutes. Can I get a motion? Thank you, Commissioner Brooks. Second by Commissioner Bondima. All in favor?
Brooks.
Hassan.
Richardson. Thank you. And we need to approve our closed session minutes, closed session summaries. Can I get a motion? Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Commissioner Bondima, second.
Brooks.
Commissioner Brooks, thank you. All in favor?
Brooks.
Hassan.
McFadden.
Richardson. Oh, okay, I'm sorry. That's 8 and 2 absent. 1 absent. Okay, 8 and 1 absent. Thank you. I'm going to ask that you all bear with me tonight. Our board chair is going to be absent tonight, and I'm stepping in her place. So this is my first time leading this meeting in this way. So just please bear with me. I'm learning the ropes here. We need to do an approval for our personnel and quasi-judicial matters. May I have a motion to approve the personnel and quasi-judicial matters?
I would like to remove agenda item 3.02, appeals and hearings case number 20-12G from the consent agenda.
Okay. May I then have a motion to accept the hearing examiner's recommendation as presented for item 3.02?
So moved.
Moved by Commissioner James Hassan, second by Commissioner Bondima. All in favor?
Hassan.
McFadden.
Richardson? Any opposed?
Brooks.
So that's
7.
7 approved and 1 opposed and 1
He
absent.
doesn't vote on, the one doesn't vote on that.
Linda's absent. Yeah.
Sorry.
Okay, we're all getting it together up here. Okay, then at this time, we'll have our CEO comments.
You don't have comments? Oh, sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm moving ahead. Hold on. Thank you. May I have a motion to accept the hearing examiner's may I have a motion to approve the remaining PEP and quasi-judicial matters?
Make a motion to approve.
So moved by Commissioner Brooks, second by Commissioner James Hassan. All in favor?
Brooks.
Hassan.
McFadden.
Richardson?
Robertson Reed.
8 approved and 1 absent. Okay, now we will have our CEO comments.
Good evening, everyone. I would like to invite Chief Jeremy Grant Skinner for this evening's PEP agenda. Oh, is he not here? Okay, well, we'll wait for Chief Grant Skinner, but while we do that, I will continue on. First, I will begin this evening, as we often do, with a brief video created by our team of student reporters. On January 6th, we celebrated the opening of our 3 newest 21st century school buildings, Calvin Rodwell, Baybrook, and John Rura Elementary Middle Schools. Our veteran student reporter, Bryce Taylor, covers the action at the ribbon-cutting ceremony at Baybrook. You should also know that when Bryce is not being an amazing journalist, he is also a Baltimore and nationally renowned chef. So he is truly a Renaissance man in that sense of the word. And he really helped mark the opening of all 3 schools with this video. So if we could proceed and play.
Hey, it's Bryce Taylor with the City Schools Student Media Team, and today we are celebrating the grand opening of 3 21st century buildings, John Rura, Calvin M. Rodwell, and right now we're at Baybrook Elementary Middle School. Let's get this party started.
Signify the kind of spaces and expectations we have for all young people in the city of Baltimore.
All right, I'm here with Principal Reese. Principal Reese, can you tell me, how does it feel to have a brand new building?
I'm so excited to have a brand new building. Our school began with 3 different buildings when I first started here 4 years ago. And now we have this amazing 21st century building where all of our scholars can be underneath one roof and get the latest 21st century technology.
It was awesome.
This is nice.
Check me out on this sweet podium right now. We're in the theater room. Theater for elementary, middle, that's dope. I'm getting that Shakespeare on, to be or not to be.
Out of other things that they're offering for us, like theater, drama, there's so much more offering to them to prepare them for the world that they gotta go out into.
Me and my friends, we finally get to learn in a brand new environment.
We have bigger hallways and we have more classrooms than we had before.
And now we're in the typical classroom. But even still, it's still 21st century. New desks, new chairs, new projector, new whiteboard. This place is dope. It's not a 21st century school visit if we don't check out the gym. The ball might be imaginary, but the fun is real. So during the presentation, this is the room that Principal Reese was talking about, the Bay Center. We have a classroom, we have a laundry room, pantry, and offices, all for the community. This is what the future looks like, community interaction. Check this out, washer and dryer. That's too dope. That is way too dope. This is amazing.
In that space, we're going to have after-school programming. We're going to use that space to have activities for our parents, so build parent partnership. And we're also going to do things to support student wholeness.
We are very proud that today Baltimore City has invested in our futures. Thank you.
What an incredible tour of the Baybrook Elementary and Middle School. You can tell students are going to flourish here. But here's the thing. Today marks the day that 14 21st century schools have been opened. And not to mention, there are 14 more on the way. It is an incredible time to be a part of the Baltimore City Public Schools family, especially if you're a student. This has been Bryce Taylor with the City Schools Student Media Team.
Commissioner Frank is over here saying that was dope. But I do want to give a special thanks and congratulations to our 21st century team. It is not easy to coordinate the openings of 3 new schools on the same day, but they delivered as usual. Also, thanks to our operations team, which supports these efforts, and really thanks to the combined efforts of everyone involved. We now have more than 10,000 City Schools young people that are benefiting from the high-quality learning environments that they need and deserve. We will not stop until every student in Baltimore has what they need to be successful. Last week, I joined local government leaders from across the state, including Mayor Young, in testifying before the House Appropriations Committee in support of House Bill 1. It was a definite momentous occasion to see literally all of the state, I should say the county executives, Mayor Young, across the state coming together across the aisle to really advocate for construction dollars for jurisdictions statewide. Here in Baltimore City, passage of this legislation is critical because it would allow us to proceed with Phase 2 of the 21st Century Building Program. Many of you who were here at earlier meetings know that the board approved a direction that's focused on using any new wave of 21st century schools money to really provide for some of our historical high schools 21st century school buildings. I do want to say that with MSA, we are forecasting that we will complete a total of 28 school buildings, which will be home to 32 schools and approximately 20,000 students total. House Bill 1 is currently awaiting a vote from the Appropriations Committee. I want to thank the city delegation. I want to thank Speaker Jones, Adrian Jones, and I also want to thank our own chairwoman of appropriations, Maggie McIntosh. They have tirelessly advocated for this at the state legislature, and I really just, again, want to thank them for all their work in this. It is now my pleasure to welcome two special guests, Mr. Franklin Baker, President and CEO of United Way of Central Maryland, and Ms. Sophia Minot, Senior Relationship Manager at United Way. Sophia, did I say, is it the French way or the English way?
Minot for celebrity purposes, but it's really
Okay, good. And she is the Senior Relationship Manager at United Way. They are going to share some of the many ways that United Way helps those in need across Baltimore City, throughout Central Maryland. The Baltimore City fundraising campaign started earlier this month and continues through March 27th. So we're thrilled that they're here. I want to thank them for their continued commitment to city schools. I know that CEO Baker has been steadfast in continuing to champion the actual involvement of United Way directly in Baltimore City Public Schools. So thank you for that.
Thank you. And thank you for being such a wonderful chairperson for the work of United Way, serving on our board. Thank you, Martha, for being a friend, serving in leadership together.
Best class
Thank you for the entire board for giving us a few moments of your time. So we've been igniting change for quite some time in the community. We have worked very steadily to focus on core areas to improve our communities. In fact, our wonderful vision is happy, thriving communities where everyone lives their best lives. And that is really what we have been focused on as an organization. Family stability. Since 2012, we have stably housed more than 2,400 families that have avoided eviction, not entered shelter. Those students tied to those families have avoided a very disruptive school transfer. They remain in their school of origin at the rate of 95%. Education, on track for success. One of the 5 schools that we're working in is Baybrook Elementary Middle School, as well as our Family Stability Program. Financial stability, families are earning more money as a result of the intensive case work for the case managers that are assigned to them. We have so many different projects in the health space, and 211, over 120,000 people called our 211 line this past year to receive services that range from utility assistance to food, to housing, etc. So the numbers tell the story. At our Ben Franklin High School, we run a program, it's a family center. The national average graduation rate for teen parents is about 40%. Since we've been doing this in this school in 2014, we've been right around 80% of our teen parents graduating at Ben Franklin High School. That deserves a hand clap. And we have really helped a lot of communities where they're food insecure. We work with the Maryland Food Bank and so many other partners to ensure that really solid meals are being served to families throughout the jurisdiction. So we are growing and developing leaders. In fact, our mission really is simple, to improve lives by doing 2 simple things. First, to really empower leaders. And we believe leaders are not only in the boardroom, they're in the block. So we're improving and emboldening, empowering leaders from the boardroom to the block, and to literally help everyone in the community to do their part to strengthen our community. And so we have, as I mentioned, United Way Ben Franklin Family Center, to our On Track for Success programs, focusing on the ABCs, attendance, behavior, and coursework. When our students from middle school through 9th grade are getting off track in any one of those areas, we have a caseworker who is assigned to do the due diligence to follow up on all those areas that can get them off track. Innovating with our partners like LIFT or BGE and others to help us to think forward and think in a new creative way at how we partner in the community. We're trying to do our best to fuel passions through your time and resources. And so as Santalisa, as she mentioned, the campaign for Baltimore City Schools began recently. It ends March 27th. We really want to go from 135,000 that we did the last year to 150. I think we can do it. We want to really focus on increasing individual participation or giving from the 8% number to 10%. And that's a modest improvement. We may can improve that, but we will start with a modest improvement. And then, of course, we want to increase the number of offices and schools that are participating from 126 to 176 for our 50 additional schools to help us in that process. And then lastly, this is your BCPS United Way team. So on the BCPS side, Dr. Bowden, who's chairing, David, Marianne, and Jeremy helping through the process, and myself and Sophia. We are really excited about what your dollars and your participation in the community means for so many families, for so many individuals who rely upon our support throughout the year. So with that, I'll turn it back over to Dr. Santelises.
Thank you.
Questions?
So thank you, Franklin. Good to see you here. And just to reinforce the work of the United Way, I get calls between my work at Morgan State with college students, connecting with the community all the time about what is where do I find, what do I do? I just want to really reinforce the message of 211 and the importance of calling 211 for literally anything you could need. Housing needs, clothing needs, help with addiction, health services, transportation. Where do I find my post office? How do I find where I vote? All these kinds of things may seem silly, but there are really caring, well-trained staff that answer every single question and will immediately connect you with the resources that you need. So the work of the United Way is really, really important for our whole community. It's the fabric that's helping hold us together. So just to reinforce that for you all. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good. Thank you again for all your work, the partnership. We're committed to making sure that our participation hits those very modest goals this year. But thank you so much for coming out. At this time, I'm going to invite Chief Grant Skinner for this evening's PEP agenda.
Good evening, Dr. Santelises and commissioners. We have a couple of appointees who are here tonight, so if you are here, you can stand when I call your name so we can recognize you. First, Catherine Drayton Barber, Educational Specialist, is appointed Special Education Liaison effective January 29th. Second, Megan Holly, Mathematics Academics Coach, is assigned Educational Specialist 2 for Secondary Mathematics effective January 29th. Next, Safanya Ray, Educational Associate for MTSS at Booker T. Washington, is appointed Educational Specialist 2, effective January 29th. And Safanya is here, I believe. And finally, Emily Augustine, currently Assistant Principal at Patterson Park Public Charter School, is appointed Principal at Clay Hill Public Charter School, effective February 3rd.
Thank you, Chief Grant Skinner. As is our custom, Principal Augustine, we will just read a brief overview for our newest school leader. It's important to know that Emily Augustine has served in city schools for the past 14 years, most recently as the Assistant Principal of Patterson Park Public Charter School. Prior to her 8 years in the Assistant Principal role, she worked on the founding middle school team at Patterson Park and taught both language arts and mathematics at the school and at Paul Laurence Dunbar Middle School. Coming from a long line of educators, Ms. Augustine originally began teaching in Baltimore through Teach for America. She holds bachelor's degrees in English and psychology from the University of Rochester and a master's in teaching from Johns Hopkins University. She is excited to bring a whole child education to the students and families of Southeast Baltimore, the community where she lives and raises her own 2 Baltimore City children. Please join me again in congratulating Emily on her appointment as principal of Clay Hill Public Charter School. And before we move on, I would also like to acknowledge, I had forgot to do this when we were still talking about United Way. I do want to thank the members of the city schools team that are really working and championing the United Way effort. They are doing this in addition to their day jobs, and in one case, even in retirement. So I want to thank Chief Grant Skinner, Dr. Andrea Bowden, who's the chair, Principal Dave Verdi, and Assistant Principal Marion Peck from Achievement Academy. I want to thank you all for your work championing the United Way cause. Thank you. Earlier this month, more than 500 staff members participated in our first district headquarters meeting. The theme of the meeting was lead from your seat. This is a phrase that I like to use, as well as others, just to really exemplify the leadership focus of the blueprint, which means leadership is about action, leadership is about service. It's not about whether you have only 3 letters next to your name. And in the course of the program, we were pleased to recognize one person from every district headquarters office who received a Blueprint Award for leadership. It's important to know that our Blueprint Award winners were nominated by their peers because they exemplified the qualities of true leadership that we talk about in the Blueprint and the performance of their daily responsibilities. All of our winners received certificates and prizes during the event, but I wanted to bring them back tonight for the recognition that they deserve. I would ask each of our Blueprint Award winners to stand when their names are called and come forward for a group picture. First, from the Academics Office, Emmanuel Faulkner, Educational Specialist 2 in Library Services. From Achievement and Accountability, Pat Heron, Student Records Technician. From Finance, Debbie Gray, Associate, Shared Services. She's not attending this evening, but we are thankful for Debbie's leadership. From IT, Janae Brogdon, Customer Support Specialist 3. From the Legal Office, Lisa Blades, Special Assistant. From Operations, Jacintha Hughes, Director of Transportation Services. From the Schools Office, Anthony Pena, Manager, School Operations Support. From the Executive Office, Lindsay Anderson, Specialist, Office of New Initiatives. Not able to attend this evening, but we want to recognize Dante Gibbons, Employee Engagement Associate. And from Communications, Engagement, and Enrollment, Monique Sims, Manager, Partnerships and Volunteers. Congratulations to our Blueprint Award winners, with our thanks for leading from your seats on behalf of our students, schools, and staff. And I'm going to ask the Board Vice Chair to join me for a picture. I want to remind everyone that the Maryland Legislature is also considering ways to fully fund the recommendations of the Kirwan Commission. We really can't overemphasize the importance of this process to our students and families. The recommendations of the Kirwan Commission represent a once-in-a-generation opportunity to provide our schools with sufficient resources really to ensure that all of our students receive the quality education and enrichment that they deserve. Last night, I was very proud that several dozen of our students from the Baltimore Algebra Project and Baltimore Intersection demonstrated in Annapolis to demand that legislators provide full funding for the Kirwan Commission's recommendations to ensure that our students receive a high-quality education and the resources they need to succeed. I want to thank these young people for their work in advocating for themselves, for their peers, but I also want to continually charge those of us who are adults, who are voting age citizens, that really it is a bonus to have young people who advocate for resources, but the real responsibility is ours. And so we should continue to join in with them and push to end historical systemic underfunding of Baltimore City Public Schools. So I want to thank them for that. And then finally, I want to take just a brief minute to personally recognize my father, Jackson Brookins, who is visiting today. Yeah, stand up and say hello. You can stand up. You can stand up. You can stand up. So my dad is visiting. Really, he will tell you, really to see his grandchildren. I am probably incidental at this point, but what's really interesting, and this is a privilege for me to be able to say this, I know that a number of people are mourning or have been impacted by Kobe Bryant and his daughter's death, unexpected and untimely death on Sunday. And Elle Duncan, who is a reporter with ESPN, for me had one of the pieces that hit me, I think, most profoundly in all of the discussion of Kobe Bryant's legacy. And it was when he talked about, she related a conversation that she had with him about his being a father and the fact that being a dad was something that he felt very profoundly. And when she asked him at the time whether he wanted to have a son, he said, well, his wife probably, thought maybe they should have more. By the way, that was when they had 3 girls before they had 4. But he said if he could, he would have 5 more girls, and that he was definitely a girl dad. And I just want you all to know that my dad is a girl dad. And I say that because if I, at times, channel my debate team experience, if I am, shall we say, forceful at times and passionate about what I do, it is because I have a father who was never afraid to raise strong girls into strong women, and he is a girl dad, and he was very clear he was okay never having boys. So for whatever you like about me or you don't like about me, you can see him. So thank you very much, and I'm glad that he's here. So. I look like John. And I'll turn it over to you now.
Okay, thank you. She does look like her dad, right? So we, because we're early, I think, can we move to the presentation under 9.01, the 21st Century School Buildings Plan Annual Report? Is that the staff here? Okay, thank you.
Good afternoon. Okay. Back there. Okay. Good evening, Dr. Santelises and Commissioners. My name is Dorothy Hellman. I am the Executive Director of the 21st Century Program, and I will be providing highlights this afternoon of the annual report. The annual report is only for review at this time. It will be voted on at the February 11th board meeting. The agenda is as noted, very simple. We're just going to talk about the year one and year two progress. Again, the snapshot is really going to cover everything that occurred in 2019 because this relates back to the annual report. I will be speaking on local hiring, swing location updates. I'll talk a little bit about transportation, plan amendments, and some future projects that are going to be opened. Where the year one school progress is concerned, we have 11 schools under year one. Dr. S. mentioned it earlier, 10 of those schools are now open. Fort Worthington, Frederick, Wildwood, Dorothy I. Heights, Arundel, Independence, and Ace, which are both co-located at the Robert Poole Building, Pimlico, Cherry Hill, Forest Park, and Arlington are all opened. Patterson and Claremont, which are co-locating at the Patterson Building, is now under construction. That one is scheduled to be open in September of 2021. The cost of that program is, for that total year one spend, is around $526 million. Where year two is concerned, we have 17 schools in that program. 4 schools have opened, 3 of which opened in January of this year. Fairmont Harford, John Rura, Baybrook, and Calvin Rodwell are now fully operational. Mary E. Rodman is scheduled to follow in September of this year, and by the end of this year, we will see Medfield and Walter P. Carter with Louis T. Murray. Those will open in December of this year. The entire program will become substantially complete in September 2022, but we will have a few projects that will trail over into 2023, potentially 2024. The spend for year two is $648 million currently, and that will be shown in the annual report, the cash forecast. And those are the balance of the projects. Where MSA program highlights is concerned, this is pretty much just a snapshot of what is in their annual report. As at today, as Dr. Santelises mentioned earlier, we are 50% complete with all our buildings. We have 14 out of 28 buildings done, and the program is near to a 75% completion. Also wanted to point out that four of the school buildings actually contain more than one school. So in essence, even though it's 28 school buildings, we're actually delivering 32 schools. It will be home to 32 schools, 4 of which are co-located. Ace Independence, Walter P. Carter with Louis T. Murray, Claremont and Patterson, Harford Heights and Sharp Leadenhall, these are all co-located schools. The entire program is $1.12 billion. The year one spend is $526 million. Year two is $325 to this date. And in total, we've spent $861 million. Where MBE is concerned, year one is 172, which equates to 32% WMBE participation. Year two, that spend is 116 million, equating to 34, and an average is 33.6. Note that MSA does not have a requirement where MBEs are concerned, but the state requirement is 29%, so the program is actually exceeding that state requirement. Financials are currently tracking at under 5% for all our year one projects, for all the completed school buildings in year one. One of the things I want to point out is that the overall goal for the program was to have a reduction of 26 school facilities from the inventory to right-size the portfolio. And the intent is to increase the district-wide utilization to 86% by the end of the program. To date, we have surplused 14 buildings. Local hiring is a part of what the program does. 283 position commitments were made with the Year One program. However, those were just commitments. The final numbers was 711 new positions were filled on the Year One projects. On Year Two, we currently have 166 commitments. We intend and we anticipate, highly anticipate, that those numbers will again be very high. There are opportunities to increase local hiring. We're always looking for that. As with every project that we work on, there's opportunities and there's challenges. One of the challenges that we found was that subcontractors weren't always posting all their jobs with MOED, so we have mandated that all job postings actually go through MOED, including quarterly projections. And MOED is currently working on investing in education and training so that they can actually grow their staff to actually fill those highly skilled positions. The current chart shows the breakdown on current construction projects in Year One, and these are projects that are currently under construction now. On the Patterson-Claremont project, again, these are all unofficial new hires, local hires. We have 9. In Year Two, again, I mentioned we have 157, which equates to 166 total. This, again, we anticipate will increase substantially. We normally tally the count 6 months after the projects are completed. City Schools manages the background investigations for the 21st Century Program. Over 6,000 applications were processed. As at this date, 281 applicants were not cleared. City Schools actually started in partnership with our MOU partners. We started an appeal process. We actually managed the background investigation, and so we created a second chance program. And this is where we give opportunities for those that have failed with their background investigations to actually provide additional background information. And if deemed cleared, that will then allow them to work on a project site. Things that limit us in a background check includes homicides and murder, any crime involving children or felonies. But outside of that, if they're misdemeanors, we do continue to work with applicants on a one-on-one basis to see whether or not we can provide clearance. It is not a risk for City Schools. It is actually the builder and the contractor that takes on the risk when they hire that person. Where local hiring is concerned, we also have a 21st Century Student Internship Program. We began that partnership with Urban Alliance in 2016, and students, high school students, are actually paired with 21st Century design and construction firms during their senior year of high school. To date, we have hired through the program 18. We hired 8 this year. Our intention is to increase that number to 12. The 21st Century department here at North Avenue will be hiring 2 of these interns as we get into summer of this year. Swing locations. This is where our schools temporarily reside while our permanent schools are under construction. The chart shows where all our swing locations are currently and their moving date. We have 9 schools that are now in swing spaces. Mary E. Rodman will relocate in September 2020 to her permanent location. Walter P. Carter and Medfield will relocate at the end of this year also to their permanent location. Feasibility studies. All year plan schools studies are complete. Commodore John Rogers, which is the last of the Year 2 plan schools, will have revised options by spring 2020. Looking forward, the current program does have $350,000 available to address future studies under the Year 3 plan. Last year, our Office of New Initiatives rolled out a new plan which recommended that we concentrate on renovating high schools. And this was approved January the 14th. Those studies are now in progress. We're looking forward, as Dr. Santelises mentioned, for the approval of House Bill 1, also known as the Built to Learn Act, in 2020 in the legislative session, which will provide an additional $400 million that will fund the construction of these schools. We need everyone's help and everyone's support in fighting to ensure that this bill is passed. Finally, no more save the dates for these 3 schools. They opened in January of this year: Baybrook, Calvin Rodwell, and John Rura. We thank everyone who came out and participated in those events. We're actually looking forward to Mary E. Rodman opening in August of this year.
Does anyone have any questions? Commissioner?
Yes, I do. I was looking at, and I think you're doing an excellent job. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
I'm always looking at contracts and the participation of all the contractors that's involved in building and working with our school. But several times over the few years that I've been here, we talked about contractors having to participate in donation, and not, well, donations, but just participate in the school system because they get a lot of work from us.
Right.
And have we done anything about, and I was, which one was it when we listed all the contractors, Whiting, Turner, which number was that? I was trying to find where I had seen that. We listed the contractors that were, which number was that?
Oh, you were looking at the participation levels?
Yeah.
Okay.
Which number was that? For some reason, I can't find it. Well, anyway, for example, Whiting and Turner, they participate a whole lot in building all over the country. And it would be great to see, even though our students get into these programs, we get 5, 6 students involved. I really need to see how many of those students get hired, because programs are wonderful, they learn a whole lot, but the issue is how many are hired. And how many students are actually involved in these programs. It would be nice to see some percentages so we can know exactly what's going on, with these contractors. You know what I'm saying?
Right now, where students are concerned, we only track them through the partnership that we have with Urban Alliance, and to date, we have 18. But I'm sure that there are other things that companies like White and Turner or CAM or other companies or other things that they do where they actually have hires for other students as well.
Yeah, and one of the things, Commissioner, that we can do on that is make sure we pull out some of the data when we do our career pathways update, and maybe work with not just 21st Century, but as Ms. Hellman was saying, make sure that we actually break out the participation rate because it crosses over. Like when we're talking about students, for example, I talked to the CEO of Whiting Turner last week, and we were talking about how to build out a program at Douglas, right? And he was very committed to that. But I think there's some kind of overlap between the kind of, the work that the board has heard we're doing to really revamp our career pathways and 21st Century. So it might be helpful to give you a fuller context and then situate the 21st Century connections within that. Does that make sense?
Yes, of course it does. Because one thing that I have learned and found out is that we bring our kids in for internship, which is wonderful. We don't even know sometimes what they actually do when they get there. We don't want them to be water boys. You know what I mean by that? That to do running around, picking up we want them to get skills so that when they and this is critical, because when they graduate and they've been in these programs, we want them to be qualified for the jobs that they're working with. And not just there for 6 weeks and we watch what's doing. We want them hands-on in there doing the work. And it would be great, and just like you said everything, it would be great if we actually could go in and see, okay, we had 6 students there. How many of those students actually got hired? And we could have more students, where we have many students who are doing, majoring in this area. How many of those students are hired? And I know it's a financial piece that I'm talking about. How many actually stay? Because they could bring them in after graduation for a few months and find out that a few months later they're gone.
One of the things we do have is we do have a video that we created this year. We do have students that participated in the program and we videotaped them. We do have several that came through the program, and again, with Urban Alliance, what they did, they provided them opportunities to learn about interviewing, how to dress, how to interview. But the other thing that we also propel them to do is to further their education as well. In that video, if that is passed along to you, you will see that some of the students actually are going on to higher education. Because what the program does, it solidifies them, because they do have mentors that actually push them to actually be better. So it's not just landing where you are and continuing where you are, you have an initial internship. The intent is to continue. I should know that because I actually went through an internship program when I was young, and I also had my organization that actually pushed me or encouraged me to actually go ahead to get a certificate in construction management and then architecture, and then I proceeded to get in my MBA. So it is a pathway, it is a stepping stone to get to the next level.
Only one other thing I want to say. Contractors complain about one thing, is that when they hire these students to do internship, they want them to be able to read and write.
Yeah.
Okay? Because they are given duties where they have to read, have to look at all kinds of documents, and they don't want to bring students or people abroad who cannot do that, because now they're training them again. They lose a whole lot of money to train somebody to do basic work. So we want to make sure that we get a survey or information from the contractors and tell us what was missing.
Okay.
What is it that we should be doing? Because that's the wonderful thing about the program. Not only are our students getting work, doing work on the job, we need to find out from the contractors, what do we do, what kind of work, or what should we be doing to make sure that we are giving them what they need?
Yeah,
Okay.
and I would just say that's also, Commissioner, part of the data we're collecting in the revamping of the career pathways overall. Because that exactly what you said is why we have part of our focus is not just early literacy, but is also secondary literacy, for exactly that reason. So we'll make sure that the 21st Century team gets to feed some of their particular data into the larger report that we should be given to the board.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Commissioner McFadden?
This probably does not relate to 21st Century, but I saw the mention of the feasibility studies that we approved on the 14th. Can someone just refresh me on the way that will work, the process of the feasibility study, and when will we see that update?
So this is under the 21st Century Program, and City Schools does manage the feasibility process in partnership with Maryland Stadium Authority. So the way we kick it off is we have a pre-qualified set of designers or architects, so to speak, that MSC actually works with. A scope of work is created. A part of that actually is the responsibility of City Schools, where they actually create the ed spec program for the potential school of what they want it to look like. That is then bid out, but then we also, at the same time that's out there, we're actually doing our assessment of the existing building. We're looking at the infrastructure, we're looking at the traffic, we're looking at environmental concerns, and we also have the educational portion of City Schools also looking at the CTE programs, and again, specific to high schools and what needs to occur. At some point, all of that actually combines together. We have general meetings with the Department of Transportation. We have meetings with the Planning Department as well, with UDAP and with several other groups to actually talk about the program on a global level and on a detailed level as well. So it's a very intensive and extensive, We can actually provide you with a schedule outline if you'd like. But the process is, we're going through the process right now. We've started with Frederick Douglass. And the intent is to get through as many of those feasibility studies by the time we actually get to spring, definitely by summer of this year. This year. We should have some of the preliminary analysis that comes in from each of the different buildings that are on that program. And right now, it's 8.
That's very helpful. That's very, say it again? The concept? The cost, what will the cost be of the feasibility study?
Currently, we
I'm
have.
sorry.
Currently, we do have $350,000 that was set aside for the year 3 schools, the year 3 planned schools, which again, those were kind of put aside for the high schools. That's the money that will be used for the high school
Right.
program.
That was very helpful. And no, I don't need the schedule. I just
Okay.
wanted to be refreshed on that process.
Okay. It's
Thank
a very detailed and intensive process.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
You're welcome.
Are there any other questions?
One follow-up on the cost, though. We think the cost will actually be higher than that, so we're going to be coming back to the board at some point for the additional.
We might be coming back to the board. One of the things that we are doing is we're expanding the feasibility studies. Now we're actually looking at traffic patterns as well. When we're planning this, we're looking at, off-site within the school zone. Again, now that we have all these lessons learned with regards to the current portfolio of projects, our intent is to do better on the high school program. So you will see that reflected in the budget.
Can you
And
speak
again-
more to traffic patterns? Can you speak more to that issue?
Pardon?
Traffic patterns, can you speak more to that?
I can speak to the issue, but a part of that ties back into the Department of Transportation. You're always looking for the egress and the ingress route for each of the different schools. We want to make sure that we have adequate parking. We want to ensure that around the community and around the neighborhood that we're looking at the traffic patterns. We want to understand where we need to have signage. We need to understand where we need to have crossing guards. We need to understand where we need to have crossing, crosswalks. So it's a pretty intensive program, process that we actually go through. But that is not managed by us.
Okay.
We actually coordinate with the Department of Transportation to get that done. Yeah.
I was just going to say, again, thank you to Dorothy, the entire 21st Century team. It is, there's no way we could have gotten through 14 new schools in such a short period of time. I talked to colleagues across the state and across the country. Nobody is trying to build 5 schools per year. So thank you for your leadership, and please thank your team.
I will.
I just add one school on the 5 schools per year. I think it's sometimes lost. It's not an arbitrary distinction, but the school district itself is building 2 schools. So we have the 28 schools plus the 4 co-located schools, and the district itself is building 2 schools that are, I think, net zero schools. So I want to congratulate the whole team.
That's right. So in the fall, we'll
And
open up
Lynette's here.
Mary Rodman plus 2 net zero schools at Graceland and Holabird.
Okay.
Thank you, Commissioner Frank. Say that in the mic.
I said we still need more money for the rest of our schools. I mean, we have the oldest portfolio in the state, so I think it's important to mention that.
Okay, so thank you, everyone. I want the commissioners to look at the consent agenda. And let us know for the staff, are there any items that you want to remove from consent? Say it again. Oh, I'll go one by one. Good Lord. All right. So 8.01, 8.02.
I'd like to pull 8.02.
Okay.
I just have a clarifying question before we vote on it.
Okay. Should he say what his question is so that the staff can prepare?
I just want to know who the resident agent will be switched to and what the process is for us in making that update now that we are switching those folks.
Okay.
It's new. I've never seen it before. I don't think we've had to do that before, so I'm just curious to know
How that works.
how that works.
Okay, thank you. 8.03, 8.04, Okay. 8.05, 8.06, 8.07, I would like to pull for recusal. 8.08. And you're pulling for? Question, recusal, vote?
I just need more clarification on the correlation between considering middle school attendance for admission.
Okay, thank you. So under procurement, 12.01,
like to pull that,
NCS
please?
Pearson? Okay, we'll pull that. And for question?
I think did I already tee it up enough for you, Dr. S? That question for staff? I'm sorry. On NCS Pearson?
Repeated for.
Did you already communicate? So my question, I'm just looking for distribution of certificated CTE program. How many people are getting them? Could we better serve students by getting one site license and busing kids to that site to take the exams rather than spending the money at each individual school location? Or is that possible?
Thank you, Commissioner. 14.01, Planton Moran.
Right.
Okay, we're going to pull that for
You want me to tell you why?
question, yes.
Oh, yeah, I just had a question on a document that said that, and I just don't understand what they mean by without an MBE and a WBE waiver mean. What does that mean?
Yeah, we discussed that in the operations committee and have similar questions.
Okay.
Yeah, so you wanted to pull it as well?
Yes, please.
Okay.
Okay, perfect, thank you.
14.
14.02. 15.01, 15.02. And is that it? Okay, that's it. All right, so we will pull those items, but right now we're going to move into public comment. And it is my pleasure to introduce Mary Pat Clark. We're so excited to always have her here.
Yeah, I have your back.
Welcome, Mary Pat. You can go sit up there.
Okay, thank you. I really, are the people here from Mervo? I can't see that far in the. All right, well, I'm here with Mervo. Oh, thank you.
Do an audio record, and so if you're not on the mic, we can't.
Oh, okay. I'm here with Mervo, and I kind of would like to follow them, follow them. Is it our turn now? I don't want to mess things up. I'll be glad to give my comments, but they don't like, they are.
We don't see them on the list, so perhaps you can represent them, or you can bring them up with you.
Oh, no, I'd like to bring them up, and they can.
They're not on my list.
You're not on the list? Oh, hey, Mervo.
Number 4.
To the front.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, what?
Safety potential. Oh, they are. I apologize. So.
Oh, okay, I'll join
3
you.
minutes of public comment?
3 minutes,
Or-
well.
No, hold on. I got you. I got you.
I don't need to say anything except we got a great PTA, we have a lot of.
So we wanted to give you respect because you are one of our elected officials, and we wanted to invite you to come up first, but we have some special invited partners who typically speak before the public. So if you want to, let me, either you can speak and then we'll hear from the guests from Mervo later on, or if you want to just hang out a little bit with us, and then when they come up to speak, you can join them. Okay. Okay, perfect. And thank you for understanding. Thank you for understanding that.
It's great to be here, I'm learning a lot. It is the Department of Education.
Okay. We have our BTU. Is John Casey here representing BTU? Hello?
Good evening, Commissioners, Madam Chair. Good, thank you. Good evening, Commissioners, Madam Chair, Dr. Santalese, and I always have to say to my friend Allison Perkins Cohen. Hello, good evening. I'm John Casey, a field representative with the Baltimore Teachers Union. Some of my thunder has been taken tonight to talk about some of the new schools that have been built. I cover the Northwest region of the city for the Teachers Union, and there are some really beautiful schools in the Northwest region that have been renovated last year and this year. So it's been talked about, and I want to concur with everything that's been said about the schools looking beautiful for the students, staff, and for the community. I know the community is using the facilities also, so I think you're doing a great job. And from my understanding, more are coming, and you're working very hard to renovate a lot of the schools. With that being said, there are going to be some schools being closed this year for enrollment purposes, the buildings being old. We want to make sure that the teachers who are in those schools will be given first priority or preferential priority when the transfer fair comes around in the spring. These buildings are being closed through no fault of the teachers, so we want to make sure that they're given an opportunity to interview and to try to find a school of their choosing. Because they've done nothing wrong, they're being simply moved to another location. Upcoming negotiations with the PSRP chapter will be starting very soon, and we are hoping that there will be, as always, positive dialogue with respect to the contract. That will be beneficial to the school system along with the BTU. Recent negotiations have been very productive in moving the school system and the BTU forward. So those will be starting in the next couple of weeks, and we're looking forward to meeting and discussing some possible language change that could benefit everybody moving forward. I have to say that our workings with labor relations have been really, really great in the last year. I think hiring a new extra person to do and assist with labor relations is beneficial to the school system and also to the BTU in moving things forward in a timely fashion and getting certain matters resolved quickly for our membership. And last but not least, it was talked about the Kerwin, and the BTU took a bus down last night, and a lot of people, and I did see the students for Kerwin. Lawyers Mall is not open anymore. It's being renovated. And there was a nice turnout with television stations looking and getting information from the students who participated. And the BTU is definitely hand in hand with the school system in supporting the Kerwin. We were down there lobbying last night, some of the legislators, who will be voting on the Kerwin. So it's nice to have a partnership, and we are definitely working hand in hand. And anything the school system would need from the BTU and vice versa, we're going to hopefully get that passed to benefit everybody in Baltimore City Public Schools. So that's all I have. Any questions? All right. Well, thank you for your time.
And John, I just want to say really thank you to the BTU, to the entire membership for the advocacy. You all have actually been side by side with us over the long haul, not just these past couple of months. So I just want to thank you all, the membership, for really joining with us to kind of strategically advocate for our schools.
It's all for the benefit of the students. We got to work hand in hand to benefit the students of Baltimore City. That's what the teachers are here for, the paraprofessionals, and everybody, is to make sure that the school system and the students are taken care of. So thank you.
Thank you. All right, we have Natalia Walter Adamson.
Leadership 18, best class ever.
Good evening, everybody. Tonight you are considering KIPP Baltimore's application to increase our enrollment cap from 1,518 students to 1,626 students, an increase of just 108 students. City Schools has characterized this as a budget-based decision. In fact, it is an academic decision. We have demonstrated through our application that we deliver effective school programming. We have both physical and staff capacity to enroll the additional students, and we have demand from parents and families to support the additional capacity. And that our current families support this request to increase class size by 2 students. City School staff has recently raised concerns regarding the size of our school staff as the main rationale for the recommendation that our application be denied. As a KIPP school, we have research-based beliefs about the staffing model required to deliver a strong academic program. Please see our theory of impact document in your packet on green paper. For example, each assistant principal is expected, among other things, to observe each of their teachers, conduct data meetings, and lead collaborative planning weekly. In order to accomplish this, KIPP recommends each coach have no more than 8 to 10 teachers. In their testimonials, staff expressed the importance of our coaching structures in their growth, development, and satisfaction. Please see those testimonials in your packet on yellow paper. We did not come to this decision lightly. We have maintained a flat enrollment for 5 years during many difficult budget seasons. So what makes this year different? We relocated to a new building in partnership with City Schools, thank you, that allows for growth in a safe and welcoming environment. We made changes to our school structure, including moving 5th grade to an elementary model. We maintained our enrollment in our move year with 81% student retention. And we welcomed 288 new students to our school this year while improving our culture and academic data. All of this leads us to feel confident in our ability to support additional students. City School staff raised a concern about increasing class sizes. Our class sizes currently range from 26 students to 32 students. Even with this enrollment increase, our largest class size would not exceed 32. Which is well below the class sizes in many district schools. Further, our staff and families support this request. A petition signed by 561 families representing about 50% of our student body has already been provided to City Schools, and our KIPP team and family has filled this room and room 120 tonight. City School staff recently suggested that KIPP Baltimore was heavily staffed compared to other KIPP regions, namely KIPP DC. As you will see from the data on the white paper in your packet, when compared to schools with similar grade bands across KIPP, we have fewer leaders per student than most KIPP schools and all of KIPP DC. In addition, our operator staff is significantly smaller per student. Finally, City School staff has suggested that you deny this application due to their belief that our staffing model makes us unsustainable. The fact is that every school in this district not growing enrollment is unsustainable by that definition. With revenue flat and declining, each of the schools would have to make cuts every year like we did the past 5. The district itself has recognized its own lack of sustainability and is strategically growing enrollment and advocating for increased education funding. Yet City School staff recommends you deny our application for using those same strategies. As a
Excuse me, you're out of time. Thank you.
Thank you.
I thank you very much. And thank you all for coming tonight. Okay, we have a question from Commissioner Frank.
I do. It's a question for you, Madam Chair. Did we pull this for consent or from consent or not?
Well, I'm going to come back to the consent conversation and you can pull
Okay, thanks.
after that's what public comment is for, so you may
I
change your
understand.
mind.
Thank you.
Yep. Okay, thank you. Next on the list is Clara Botstein. Thank you. Okay. And can I get the lights turned back on? Oh, maybe someone's leaning against the switch or something. If you are, can you turn it back on for us? Sure. Okay. You can give it to. So you said 2 slots. Who's the second slot? James. So then you guys can get 6 minutes, right? And you'll move from one to the next. And for the public, they were right after each other, so no one's being cut in front of for this. Or getting extra time, right?
There's one other seat over here.
Right. Nobody cut.
You're gonna start?
So this is our team from BART. We'll save the time.
Make sure your mic is on too. We want to capture this.
All right, is that better?
tell us when. Okay. Thank you for the opportunity to comment on the waivers that Bard Baltimore is requesting from the Board of School Commissioners. The focus of this testimony is on our request to review attendance data and admissions. As you know, Bard Baltimore is an early college high school awarding an associate's degree and a high school diploma in 4 years free of charge to students. All students in 11th and 12th grades are enrolled in a college program of study. There is no high school diploma-only track. The primary point of admission to Bard is the 9th grade. We do not have a separate admissions process for the associate's degree program that begins in 11th grade. In 2014, when we applied to open Bard Baltimore, the school board requested that we not review students' prior academic records and admissions. This was a departure from prior practice at the Bard early colleges. We are proud of our commitment to educational access, our diversity, and the success of many of our students. However, our admissions process needs to be more robust to identify students who can best benefit from the free college program that Bard offers, and to make sure that all of our students are set up for success, at the very least for the high school diploma. Because Bard's curriculum is accelerated with a focus on discussion-based classes, attendance is critical for academic success at Bard. The data supports that. We have a subset of around 18% of students who are on track to be chronically absent beginning in the first month of 9th grade. These students cannot substantially benefit from the academic program or the numerous supports and interventions we have in place. The data shows up that they end up not graduating from high school. We request that the board approve this waiver because we strongly believe that reviewing attendance and admissions will allow us to identify students who can benefit from our unique program while maintaining our commitment to equity and inclusion and without focusing on traditional measures of achievement.
Good evening. Thanks for the opportunity. I'm a member of the advisory board, and I'm just here in support of the waiver application to underscore just one important point. Because we do not use school student transcripts, the decision on admission is driven by the interview and a writing sample that allows us to probe the student's understanding of what kind of a commitment to challenge that they are getting into with Bard. As a startup, we learn as we go. One of the lessons that we've learned is we cannot start early enough in having a conversation with the student about the importance of being present. So that's why we're interested in being able to use information about attendance so that we can have an informed conversation with the student to strengthen their ability to complete the program. We already have, as you'll see in our written comments, positive experiences with working with students with absentee issues and getting them to succeed, but you cannot start early enough.
I'm Francesca Gamber. I've been the principal at Bard since we opened in 2015. The non-quantitative admissions process at our school is incredibly important to us. We were the first of the Bard early colleges to do that, and we believe in that as part of our equity mission. Our document outlines a plan for a good faith use of the attendance data. We think that the need for this is borne out by our own internal data, which is showing a strong correlation between absenteeism and not just the inability to complete the associate's degree, but a delay in graduating from high school at Bard. So the last thing that we want is for a Bard education to make it more difficult for students to graduate from high school. And we think that this is an additional piece of information that will allow us to prepare students without erecting additional barriers.
My name is Dr. Patrick O'Ray. I'm founding faculty at Bard and also Assistant Dean for Academic Affairs. I'm addressing the board because in my experience for all the years that we've been there, I've taught at the 9th grade level, I've taught at the year 1 level, and these are the two major critical points for our students. And I have to say that instead of robust, I would say I want to make sure that our admissions process is fair and equitable. Not equitable as an opportunity for all of the students all over zip codes, all over Baltimore to get a fair opportunity to succeed. Fair in that we have to be, because we are an early college, that means that we have to be selective, not elitist. That's something different. I'm talking about judicious. And it has to be connected to something. We have to be able to choose which students we believe are going to be successful and that we can help, and those who are not prepared for our program yet. we have to tie it to something. And the biggest driver that we've seen that makes the difference between success and failure is attendance. And I think it's fair for us to be able to look at those records to make sure that we are giving every student a fair chance to succeed in our accelerated program.
As chairman of the advisory board, and I just wanted to say that as a board, we have discussed this issue and we very much support it totally 100%. And we just wanted the school board to know that we have really, that the community support is behind this as well.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. First of all, I want to thank you all for coming tonight and expressing your comments on this. I have a few board commissioners who have questions of you. And so first from Andy, Commissioner Andy Frank.
Thanks. You mentioned that 22% of the ninth graders were chronically absent. I'm sorry, 18%, 22 students. Do you know how that compares to other BARD schools and how it compares to other Baltimore City schools?
Thank you for the question. In all of our other campuses, we do have access to applicants' middle school records. And so while we do take risks on students, we typically don't have a lot of students who are chronically absent at the 8th grade level. The vast majority of students who are chronically absent the first month of ninth grade also have chronically absent records in middle school when we look back. So it's just not a population that we have traditionally served. Again, we're very proud of the inclusive process that we have here in Baltimore, where we really have no sense of middle school record at all. And we're not asking for grades. We're not asking for test scores. We're not asking for behavioral records. Attendance is the one place where, as my colleagues alluded to, we want to make sure that every student walking in the door is set up for success. So we would use the attendance records to talk about the attendance in the interview and ask students, okay, what were the barriers? What might be different at BARD? How can we come up with a plan together? And really just and use that not in a way to rule out a student, but to get a better sense of them as a whole person and of their application. Does that answer your question? I'm not sure about the stats in Baltimore City. I know chronic absenteeism is an issue citywide.
Commissioner Reed?
Yes, Vernon Reed. Are these BARD kids and families behind you? No? Oh, okay.
We do have some staff who are with us.
Okay,
If
Kip,
you
okay.
could stand.
Okay, okay. I was just wondering why they were standing, that's all. Just wondering why they were standing. Okay.
Yeah, I do want to recognize the BARD faculty and staff.
Okay, there they are. Okay. All five of you are friends, so this is kind of tough for me because I think in all schools, if you looked at correlations, the correlation between attendance and success is probably one of the highest correlations you can have. So when I look at BARD, I say BARD creates an opportunity based on potential. If you're looking at attendance as a key factor, you're basically taking out the equation, which you consider to deem potential when you look at the letters, when you look at the interview. So I look at it from the standpoint that I look at it as cherry picking. I mean, I'm speaking for Vernon Reed, and I'm not speaking for the full board, but I look at BARD taking the opportunity to say, hey, we know the correlation between attendance and success. Therefore, we're taking the attendance out of the equation. So therefore, the opportunity for success of these kids is going to be a lot higher than the opportunity for success for the general population. If every school could choose their students based on attendance, a lot of kids would lose their spaces in this particular schools. I look at BARD as creating an opportunity based on what you guys see in the interviews, what you guys see in the letters, your notes, as potential. A kid may miss 30 days, but there may be a high potential kid that misses 30 days. Give them the opportunity. That's the way I look at it.
If I may, Commissioner Reed, I take your point, and I want every member of the board to understand that this is an issue we've discussed in depth, and it is not cream skimming that we have in mind. We are not cherry picking. That's why I made the reference to the lessons learned in our startup phase. All attendance issues are not the same. And we have achieved some great success with students who did have attendance problems early on. And as you'll see in the written comments, we are not using, we do not intend to use attendance information as an exclusionary device. In our rubric, it's not even going to be considered on the same level as the writing sample and the interview. What we're going to use it for is to inform our judgment about, first of all, how to talk about the challenge that the BARD program presents and that the student has to commit to, the family has to commit to, have a clear conversation about the root causes of the attendance that may be in the past for a variety of reasons and what it is we do to work together. Because one of the things BARD is proud of is the manner in which we meet the students where they are and help solve the problem together so that they can all not just succeed in graduating, but complete the college program. It is important to remember that the BARD program is heavily reliant on discussion and the Socratic method, so that when a student is not present, all of the students in the class suffer in a way that they may not in another program. And so that for everybody to succeed, we need to have a way of understanding and starting the conversation as early as possible about what that commitment means. And as you'll see in our written comments, we do have some success with students who initially had chronic absentee problems. We solved them, and those students have succeeded and graduated and are in college today.
I just want to address this from a teacher standpoint, and having taught two particular students who fit the situation. So in preparation for this meeting, I was reading many studies about the correlation between attendance and academic performance. Now, from a teacher's perspective, this is what I'm concerned with. The more high correlation between missing school and reading level, for one, okay? In the 9th grade, I'm teaching AP curriculum, okay? I also teach, I have wonderful writers some of whom don't know the parts of speech and diagramming sentences, right? When we admit our kids, right, it's done with the understanding that I bet you, right, I'm looking at this kid and in 2 years, I can prepare you for college. I can't prepare a kid who's coming in at 5th, 6th grade reading level and to put them in an accelerated program, that's unfair. It's not even commonsensical to do so, right? When I'm talking about fairness, I mean fair to the child, fair to the families, right? And also, to be honest, fair to those folks who we did not let in, different circumstances, right? One of the students who I'm most proud of, that says that this is why we don't use attendance to rule it out, okay? A student came to apply for us as a transfer student to our year 1 program. We did not let him in initially because, in addition to kind of like spotty grades, he had missed 90 days of school in his 10th grade year, right? We brought him back and asked him why. It turns out that he felt that he was being so underserved by his school that he spent a lot of that time in the library teaching himself German. And that kid got a full scholarship to Bard College, okay? I come from a magnet program, right? I would never willingly try to put things in place so that we become a cherry-picking school that's against our mission, right? And I believe that's directly against the agreement that brought us here in the first place. What I am trying to avoid, right, are those kids who are coming in drowning, and we cannot say we don't have the apparatus to save them. And I'm not saying that they're never going to get there. What I'm saying that they're not prepared for us just yet, right? Come back to us in 10th as a transfer student, year 1. We have those students too, right? We are here to serve all of the kids who come through our doors, but we have to have information that helps us be as judicious as possible so that every kid can succeed in our program. So I can look a parent in the face and say, yes, you are trusting us with your child, and we will fulfill our promise to the best of our ability, but we can't do it with a lack of information.
Just a quick note, we're happy, we would be, if approved, we would be open to working with city schools on a plan that made sure that the attendance data itself would not make or break a decision. I think just to underscore, we have a lot of support services in place. We are committed to doing outreach to the most underserved middle schools in the city. We are proud of our diversity. That map shows it. And we've made a huge investment in support staff, and we're constantly evolving our interventions. The population that doesn't show up in the beginning, starting from day 1, that's the population we're really not equipped to serve. And because of BARD's fast pace and the fact that there's really no high school option if they don't maintain a 2.0 GPA is technically what we're supposed to be doing. We've been bending that a lot. Don't tell our creditors. But it's really been a pickle because we have no other options come 11th and 12th grade. So we've done everything in our toolkit, and we feel like there's just a subset of students who were not, who would benefit and frankly be more on track for a high school diploma elsewhere. And we want to make sure that the seats at Bard are reserved for students who can make the commitment. And again, without excluding any student on face value because of attendance, but rather taking that into consideration and being able to have a conversation with the student and their family.
Okay, thank you very much. I wanted to give an opportunity, because I missed it, Dr. Santelises missed it, for the Bard faculty to just raise your hand. Who's in the room? Okay. Thank you very much for coming tonight. I have a few more board commissioners who have questions. I have some questions as well. Commissioner Brooks.
I'm interested in you all talking a little bit about the transparency in the selection of the students. And so currently, are you not able to ask questions about absenteeism in the interview process? And sort of why would you need a particular shift in that to do that?
So as far as we know, and I would defer to the O&I staff, because we were not allowed to look at prior middle school record, we have not asked any questions about it in the interview, just to maintain integrity to that request from the board. So when we first applied, we had requested as part of application to look at middle school grades and attendance. The board said, we'd rather you not, so we said, okay, we'll try that. So we have not asked. We would be, and that would be a fundamental part of what we do with the data, ask questions in the interview. So we would welcome that as an addition to our current process.
Great, thank you. And just one more quick one. And, in terms of supporting students, so for those students who are absent, chronically absent that first month or so, could you talk to me about some of the challenges that they're facing and sort of how you all are equipped or to support them currently? What's going on?
Yes, I can speak to that point. So of the 22 students who were chronically absent or on track to be chronically absent in September, we know after the fact from looking through their cumulative records that 70% of them were chronically absent in 8th grade. So the supports that we offer to them have to do with, we have a very robust counseling program. So we have 3 full-time counselors, a social worker, a school psychologist, and a therapist for a population of 450 students. So we do outreach to families, we do home visits, we refer students to counseling. We've started an attendance mentoring program that matches students who are chronically absent with a caring adult who's paying attention to whether or not they're in school. So we have pioneered a lot of things that we hope will help, in addition to helping students with mapping their transportation, maybe providing alternative assignments so that the makeup workload isn't so overwhelming when they do come back.
Yeah, I'm sorry, and thank you for that context. I was just asking specifically what was going on in their life.
For those students?
Yes, for those students.
Right.
Have you noticed any themes or patterns
Mhm.
that would suggest sort of this absenteeism, not necessarily their past prior attendance records?
Right, but currently. For a lot of those students, their absences have to do with chronic health or mental health concerns. We have a large proportion of students who miss school because of either diagnosed or undiagnosed mental health concerns. In a given year, we can have up to 25 students who are hospitalized for 5 to 7 days for mental health concerns, and that's part of the reason why we have such a robust counseling and related services department.
And just to clarify too, we would not expect to have zero chronic absenteeism. We're very much prepared to have students who don't come to school regularly or don't go to class regularly, and we're working closely with O&I to get guidance on different things we can try. We just want to anticipate better and really understand where students are coming from when they walk in the door with us.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Bondema.
Yes, I would be remiss if I didn't step in and give you my great concern. When you talk about looking at students who are habitually absent and not attending class because, and the only reason why I'm bringing up a personal thing, because this gentleman right here, you talked about you were in the magnet school, and so I'll bring that up anyway. I'm from Cherry Hill, okay? And many of the students that I was in school with, when I was in, is there. When I was in school with now are doctors, lawyers, engineers, and all of that. And most of us was always late or absent for whatever reason, because we were extremely poor. And some of the reasons why they were absent was because of death in the family, murder, rape, whatever occurred. And because we had teachers who worked with us, it happens that they were successful anyway. And I sit here right now and I can remember when I was absent a lot. I have a PhD in chemistry. I studied at Oxford, okay? And the odds that I wouldn't make it to Oxford would gone out of the door. So I could name local people from Baltimore City who graduated, who was in Cherry Hill and other parts of the city, and they were very successful. So I get really nervous when and I've been in education for 40 years. I get extremely nervous when we talk about attendance, because unless you are going to run a program where you can say, let's take 1 year to look at the program and see what happens within that year and see how that works, I would say that's a great idea. But to just put this in place, and we have so many students all over Baltimore City kids who are homeless or coming from, and we know the families that they're coming from. Some of them are latchkey kids who are raising their families. Some are mothers and fathers. In high school, they're mothers and fathers taking care of kids, and they're getting the other kids off to school. And even though you say you have social workers and people that are working with the kids, you will never know the real issues that's going on at home, because they will never tell you everything, okay? So I think it's a good idea to look at attendance, but we have some diamonds at these schools, and some of them just can't get to school. And I can name many people in the state who are in the same situation that I'm in, who are very, very successful. So what I would like to see happen is that you look at the program instead of putting it in place, because the message is wonderful, but sometimes the messenger isn't. Okay? So I would appreciate, and I'm just suggesting, that do what you're going to do, but let's take some time and see how it works. And you have parents that might be in the audience, and they might be listening. They will never tell you the whole story. So it's wonderful what you're thinking, and it's very nice, but I would recommend that you take some more time to look at that program.
Thank you so much, Commissioner. I have Commissioner Roberts. They asked your question. Okay, perfect. Commissioner Frank?
I just want to try to understand at least part of your position. Are you saying that unless you can factor in chronic absences, at least at some level, without making them high stakes, you're setting some scholars up for potential failure because of the teaching method at Bard and the associate's degree that they have potential to earn? Is that part of your position?
That's correct. So we've seen graduation rates much lower than any of our campuses across the network. We have 7 degree granting campuses serving about 3,000 students. We've always had, so there's no way to get a high school diploma and no college credit. So there's no kind of high school only courses in 11th and 12th grade. And so if a student is off track from the first month of school, let's say, they quickly become off track for a high school diploma, which isn't the case in a non-early college setting. And so, yeah, our concern is students who aren't graduating with a high school diploma or an associate's degree, and that frankly is just not data that we've seen in any of our other campuses, and we have more support in place here than at any other campus per student. And I totally agree with you. I could not agree with you more in terms of your point. And again, we would want to take those students. We want to take students with potential who have been overlooked. We would continue that commitment. Having access to the data allows us to ask questions in the interview and better understand the applicants. And again, we would be happy to work with city schools to work on a rubric that didn't exclude students because of attendance alone. We recognize all the multiple reasons why students can't attend regularly. We just want to not be in the position of taking a student who is, in a sense, worse off because they come to us. That's the last thing we would want.
I have to ask this question then. So tell me how this plays out in real life, right? So you're, because I think, I've been trying to follow the conversation, but I think I'm hearing you say you want the data, but you won't use the data in your selection process. But then you want the data, but you want to be able to set kids up for success, which might mean that they don't go to Bard. So I'm hearing both of those things, and that's confusing to me. So my question is, so if you could clarify that for me, that's the one thing. But the second thing is, What if you got the data after you selected, after you've made your selections, and you're like, these kids have been accepted to BARD, then you get the attendance data? Would that be helpful?
So thank you for the question. I'll start and feel free to jump in. So we have not set anything in stone. Our proposal right now, if approved, right now we have a rubric. So our writing assessment gets a certain number of points, our interview gets a certain number of points. Say it's 5 each. Attendance, we would rank low. So say 2 points is the maximum you can get. So if you have chronic absenteeism and you haven't explained it in the interview, you get 0 points. If you have an improving record or an okay record or a strong record, you get 1 or 2 points. So it can't disqualify you, but it's factored in. Secondly, it would allow us to ask in the interview, okay, we see you haven't gone to school a lot. So what kind of barriers did you face? How are you thinking about this at BARD? Like what could be different? So we could, if they're accepted, come up with a plan. So it couldn't rule out a student, but it would factor into the decision. I think if a student said, I really hate school, that's why I don't come, something like that would be disqualifying probably, because that would also show up in the interview. But it would be an additional piece of information. Again, this is a college application at the point of 9th grade, essentially. There's no follow-up. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. So I'm thinking it could also play out like, why don't you tell me about middle school? How was it for you? And then you're encouraging a conversation at the point of the interview where you allow the student to do some disclosing of what that experience was for them. And then you can have further dialogue around, did you go to school often? Were you absent sometimes? Like how, I'm just trying to figure out a way that we're giving every kid their best chance, and we're not finding loopholes or ways to disqualify students, to Commissioner Bondima's point, who are packed full of potential. It's just needing an experience to expose that potential.
Right. Well, I think that it's for that exact reason that we've been so careful about not asking that question in the admissions process to this point. Because our agreement with city schools is very important to us, and following that agreement with Fidelity is important to us. And so we never wanted it to be suggested that we were finding ways around and asking these questions about this data in the interview without having gotten approval for it first.
Commissioner James Hassan.
Thank you. And I definitely think we all can appreciate and understand the challenges of absenteeism in all our programs, and that we definitely have a united perspective of a need to work on attendance. I just offer this for my board colleagues to consider. If we posit that part of the reason that these students aren't in school is either acute or chronic mental illness, then this is an ADA violation if we allow any kind of illusion that kids aren't getting in because of a mental health issue. So just something to keep in your head.
Commissioner Reed.
That's my last question. Thank you very much for the answers. If I was a student coming in, Dr. Gamper, the essay's high. That's important. The interview's important. So in a percentage basis, looking at 2 kids, where does the attendance fall in for 2 kids that basically you have 1 seat and you have to make that decision? How important is the attendance?
If the scores on the other 2 things are equal.
To think in terms of potential, gut feel, where does attendance go?
Right. At that point, I would want a parent conference with the student that I wasn't sure about, because I wouldn't want to make the decision without understanding more about the context. Like if I'm just looking at the rubric, I wouldn't make the decision. I would say we need to get more information about why this kid was absent.
Dr. Santelises. Oh.
You mentioned that for this academic year since September, there's been 22 students that are chronically absent. Have you done any kind of root analysis as to why they've been absent and any causes around that?
We have, and so for a lot of those students, it does have to do with chronic health problems and mental health issues. There were also some grief and loss issues that were happening in that population.
Dr. Santelises.
Usually I actually don't ask questions at this time, but just given the presentation, I'm going to ask them anyway, or ask this one. What do you have in place to safeguard the very real human educator, and it's educator human, right? Decision-making that when you are presented with a choice with a student, you don't implicitly, not explicitly, but implicitly gravitate towards the student that presents with less challenge and less obstacle. And I'm only asking, and I'm asking that like forthrightly, right? Like just for us all, because I think it's human. I don't think it's about being bad, being good. I think in the same way that I have a board that safeguards my implicit belief in systems and has a checkpoint, what do you have in place to do that? Because because given the concentration of need within our city, a student who comes 15 more days a year is a more, just on a human, like, let's not get into whether people are good or bad, but just at a human level, it requires a little bit less effort than a young person who, for whatever reason, isn't coming 30 or 45 days a year. So knowing that we all have it, myself included, what do you have in place to safeguard? Because I keep hearing, right, we're not going to use it that way. We're not going to take it that way. And if all the players that are sitting here and standing, and by the way, you guys do not have to keep standing. We just wanted to know who you were. You don't have to keep standing. But you can if you want. You can if you want. I just didn't, I was like, God, do they feel compelled to stand? It was great seeing you. Right? If all the people change tomorrow, what is to safeguard a new slate of reviewers from going to that very human avoidance of challenge, pain, extra effort? That's my question.
Okay. The fact that our process is holistic. The questions that you're asking about attendance, and I'm listening to your responses because I'm paying attention to them for the very reasons that you bring them up, because I don't want to work in a place, right, that is elitist, right, that doesn't give a fair opportunity, right? And I've taught some of these diamonds who you're talking about, right, and I appreciate them the most, okay? But I just think that a process that is not holistic is not going to be successful, right? For the same reason that we wouldn't necessarily not admit a student because of poor grades, right? We're not going to necessarily discount a student because of poor attendance. The unique program that we have at Bard and the unique body of students, right, who are not perfect, not misfits, right, and many other places, right? This place was built for that, right? And we have an admissions process in place that ensures that people who want to have an opportunity to do this has the opportunity. But at the same time, for whatever reason, there are things in there, very human reasons, why they wouldn't be prepared for what we have to offer just yet. And I'm not saying, once again, not to discount these things somewhere down the line, but I think it's important that if you're looking for that safeguard, that mechanism, is that our admissions process is holistic. It's not dependent on any one thing. It's the whole picture. It's the whole child.
You asked exactly the right question. What do we have in place if all the players you see in front of you, the people in today's admission process, are no longer here and there's somebody else? The protection that you're asking about is hardwired into the DNA of the BARD system in terms of that's our mission, to find those people who are underserved and help them to the finish line. The only reason I'm a volunteer on this board is my understanding. The very first time I met Dr. Gamber, I asked her, so some of these same questions. So are you cherry picking? Are you cream skimming? You know, it's a tough program. And she says, no, we understand the full range of challenges that our middle school students that we're receiving have had to face, and many of them have been underserved, diplomatic way of putting it. And we don't look at test scores. You know, the holistic approach to evaluating students is a real thing. And we discuss these very issues at every advisory board meeting. I know the faculty talks about it daily, about how do we find these students, reach them where they are, and you need not worry that we would use it as a violation of the ADA or any of that kind of stuff. We just want to know what is our reality in terms of our job in meeting the students where they are and getting them across the completion finish line. That is a real thing with us. And frankly, we're kind of proud of the fact that we seek out the toughest students to get across that finish line, because think about it, 8th graders don't know anything about college in many cases. So we're getting them up a pretty steep hill, coming from a wide range of backgrounds across the city. And that's the best answer I can give you. If you look at our mission and the vision for the whole BARD system, that's what we're about. That's why we exist.
If I could just add one final thing, thank you for the question. I think so it is very much in the DNA, as James said, and we hire very carefully for alignment to the mission. I think, you know, if everyone disappeared tomorrow and there was a whole new set of characters, I think we could look at a couple things like not everyone is the same person who grades the essay and the interview and looks at the overall rubric. So I think you can put parameters in place. So like you can only get a maximum of 1 or 2 points for attendance out of 10, or you can set thresholds to make sure that to guard against just kind of the bias. The other thing is, I mean, we could do it for a year and look at the data and see if things radically change. My guess is we'd still have issues with absenteeism, but it would just be, we'd be a little bit more prepared. We could expand seats at BARD. Like, I think we're very open. We're not so over-enrolled that, you know, in fact, we asked for a waiver to shrink the school a bit. We want to identify programmatic fits and get better at that, including and particularly students who are at risk of not completing college. So that is our mission. First generation college goers, low income students, students of color. And we want to set them up for success. And it is a big hill to climb. So we want to do the best job that we can given our resources, and we feel that this is an important aspect, but certainly not, you know, a deciding factor. So we're happy to be audited by you all, to work with O&I closely on questions, to think about the rubric. We really want to be thoughtful about this. We're happy to come back and revisit it after some time has passed. We just, we're very concerned about this 18% of students who in the first month of school we're not able to reach, and they are not walking across the stage with anything. And that is, we're putting resources, we're taking away from, our mission is to provide free college. And there's so many students in Baltimore City who can do this from all kinds of backgrounds. But we want to make sure that we're focusing appropriately.
I think structurally it's a rubric that you approve that sustains itself over time, regardless of who the personnel are in the building. And a rubric where the attendance doesn't make or break the decision. And frankly, if I had my choice between a student with perfect attendance and an interview who said, I really don't want to go to BARD, I want to play football, and a student who was chronically absent but said, this is what I want, I would choose the student who had been chronically absent.
Thank you very much. We're going to move on. And for the public, just so you know, we rested here for a while. We acknowledge that. But they technically did not go over. They got their 6 minutes, and then when board members ask questions, then we're able to spend a little bit more time with the group. But thank you all for coming. And next on our list is Felicia McLevin. Let's see here. So can we do this? And I'm looking to my board commissioners for permission to do this. So just as a reminder, Mary Pat Clark wanted to wait so that she could present with her colleagues. can we give them 5 minutes, so 3 minutes? Mary Pat Clark would have had 5 minutes by herself. So can we give her 2 minutes and give this group 3 minutes, and then that'll be 5 minutes together? Is that okay? Okay, there you go.
I'll follow you, just in case you go over your time.
Good evening. My name is Felicia McElvin, and I am the PTA's, well, we have actually rebranded ourselves to CHAMPS, which stands for Committed to Honoring and Motivating Parents and Students at Mergenthaler High School. And to my right is our treasurer, and Mary Pat Clark, our city council person for Monroe, and Angie Winder, who used to be the former PTA president in Monroe. So I'm coming to you because of the incident that happened over the winter break, the potential threat. Now, I do understand, clearly, we as parents understand that there's nothing no one could do because of what happened. But our concern greatly is the lack of communication to the parents. It's as if we were not considered in the communication at all. I did receive a robocall, but I never received an email communication from anyone ever. And I've asked a lot of parents, and neither have they. So we have met, and we had 2 meetings. One, representatives from North Avenue was there at the first meeting, and we were told that the student was expelled and would not be back at Mervo, but that actually did not happen. The very next day, on Friday, the student was in school, and again, parents did not know. We were not notified that what was told to us did not actually happen. So, and we as parents have been meeting, and we know that we have internal issues as well. So we're working with Principal Langston and administration there at the school to make sure that the gap is bridged between school and home. But we come to you to ask that we have safety measures in place. So to make sure that nothing else could go wrong, that there could be, if just in case there's a mass shooting, casualty, that is prevented before we even get to that. So I do understand that the metal detectors are forthcoming if they have not been in place. We do have a scanner that has been broken for a long time. My question is there not a plan, just as if a Xerox goes down, that there are technicians that come in and fix stuff? Now, granted, we have had issues previously, earlier part of this year, but I, for one, as the leader of the CHAMPS organization, work diligently with parents. I'm at the school all the time. I give a lot to the parents. I call the children my babies. I know them by names. I know the staff. I go around, I welcome them. I volunteer in any capacity that I can. And I just want to make sure that, one, our babies are okay. Granted, they have a lot to even go through before they even get to school. They deal with a lot of trauma anyway. And Ms. CEO said, leave from your seat. And that's exactly what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to leave from the seat that I am in to make sure that Mergenthaler is okay, that our babies, once we send them off to school, that they are okay, that they are safe, and that we know that, and there is a plan of action in place that parents know, a communication. But just like at our meetings at PTA Monthly, you could come with your issues, but we also want solutions. So I am providing a solution. Our parents have requested that we have an additional police officer because of the size of the school. There are only 2 for 1,800 students.
Okay. We have 2 minutes together.
Would you like to say something there?
No.
Okay, all right. And secondly,
Oh, okay. Are you?
Secondly, parents have wondered if there could be a citywide monitor tip line where if parents know information, that they could go online or either call and give information that's helpful, and that way parents will know, and the chain of command can go down that way. And this past incident with over the holiday at Mervo, the principal was actually, she was on vacation and she was out of the country. So who in her absence is to contact families? That we don't know. So I'm going to pass the mic on to someone else if you would like to speak.
You want to speak? I'd just like to say, I would like to say that what the president has said, that I was at those meetings and the school was very concerned, and communication is very important part. There's good communication within the school building. We need some help. It was mentioned, we would like an additional police officer assigned to the school. We have 2 out of 1,700 students. We would very much like to have more than just 1 metal detector because we have 3 main entrances. We thank you for the prompt attention we're getting from the school system for fixing our exterior doors so they actually are safe and sound, for fixing some interior doors where they're new doors but the locks don't work, and that's being done as well. We're getting a lot of good attention that way. Yes, we do need we do need more attention or more safety there, because that was just brought out by what happened and the concerns that arose from that. So I'm very proud to represent Mervo, and thank you for this time. And did you want to say something quickly?
I don't know if the screen went off.
We're out of time.
I'm sorry,
We're
I
out of
used your time.
Yeah, but it's fine. I wanted to ask my fellow commissioners if they had any questions for our guests. Commissioner Roberts?
Good evening. Could you offer any insight as a parent on the thoughts and feelings from the students in the building? What were some of their concerns? What did they articulate to you?
Well, I had to go to a resource officer at the school because I couldn't get it together. That's real talk. I was shaken. I was furious that parents weren't communicated. But the students, they were afraid, very afraid, because parents could not even let them know what the action plan was. We had to get our information from the media, and every channel had something different.
So can I ask?
I was going to
ask
say I
you-
wanted to add
sure.
just for another concern. I am on the alumni board, and I have family members and friends that attend the school or their children. I want to emphasize that while that was going around on the media, there was a student who actually was targeted. That is a family member of mine. So this is very personal. Whether it was a prank or not, that person, I don't know if the police department thought that maybe he was behind it, so they went to the home. They actually interrogated him as if he was a suspect. When they found out he wasn't, it was a oops. Having the student return the next day without even notifying the family member or the student, which was my family member, I just believe that everyone involved did not do their part. That is your Northeast District, your Northern District, because his home was in Northern District. And again, that was a target specifically saying that he would be the first one to be shot. Again, if it's a prank or not, I feel like there should have been follow-up, and that student should not have been able to come back to the school, at least notify them. So the only thing the family member was able to state is that if they felt uneasy or felt as if it was a threat and uncomfortable, they can transfer. That, to me, is unacceptable.
Commissioner Brooks?
I mean, I guess the question is for us, like, in terms of protocol for communication of incidents, could someone on staff talk to me about sort of what that looks like, particularly around parent engagement?
May I just say that it is, I'm not sure what the protocol is, but that is at the heart of the communications concerns that we come here with this evening. And it's tricky because you've got a juvenile, you have the school police, the district police, and you have other people involved. And so they did communicate apparently with each other well, but there was no way to communicate effectively with the families. Now, we know about juveniles, we know the protections that they need and deserve and get, but there was no clear signal given, and of course the principal was out of the country most of when this started. There was no way to convey to families that it was safe to come back it was a Thursday and a Friday. It was back to school after the break, Thursday and Friday. And I was there on Thursday, we had the meeting. And, I mean, it was a high level of anxiety and tension amongst family members from all over. And then we also asked for excused absences, thank you for the Thursday, but on Friday, the very person returned to school who had made the threat. Nobody gave her permission to do that. That person just showed up in a class. As soon as the principal was told, immediately, then the principal took care of bringing her out of the class and back into the system here. That let that play out. But we just didn't. The parents and families never had a sense of communication that said it's okay, that they could believe.
I want to give staff an opportunity to respond to this and clear up some things. So is it John Davis? Can you?
Yeah.
And Allison.
I'm just going to start, and then John's going to fill in. So thank you so much for bringing the concerns. It's always really helpful to hear from the community members about how this was received, because it is really hard to do this well, and so it's really helpful to have us get better is to hear the feedback. So first of all, thank you for coming to do that. And I do think, as many of you mentioned, I do think it was a little bit of a perfect storm because of when it happened on a holiday. So it was just a little bit challenging because of that. There was regular communication during that time going on between the city police, city schools, the principal supervisor, John Davis, chief of schools, and myself and the CEO about what was happening with that. There were robocalls. I mean, I think one of our challenges also is that often the phone numbers we have for families are not very reliable. So one of the mechanisms we used for getting communications out was robocalls to let people know what was going on, because one way, high schools are a little different, but one way when schools are in session for younger grades, not as much high schools, we do a lot of backpacking letters home so we can reach more folks. You can't do that when there's nobody there to backpack anything to, and it doesn't work great for high school students either. I have a parent of a high school student myself, and I can tell you I have no idea what's in that kid's backpack. So that's not the best way to communicate. But robocalls we do, but robocalls, I mean, we've found that the reliability of the numbers we have is not great.
Well, a lot of people got those robocalls.
Mm-hmm.
But they weren't clear. There was no plan of action. It just stated that we would receive information from Principal Langston.
Pardon?
It only stated that we would receive an email from Principal Langston.
And when did you get the email from Principal Langston?
I never received the email.
She wasn't even back yet.
So I'll have to follow up on that, but I think there was written communications that were supposed to go out via email as well, and then some of it was through a community meeting that then I think
They had that meeting on Thursday.
Yes. So to talk about kind of next steps. Yeah. A robocall is a hard place to give a plan of action. Obviously, it has to be pretty short. It can't be very long. It's just communicating the most basic information. And I thought there were written communications that went out as well. But John,
No.
Yeah, and I also thought the robocall made it clear. But let me back up for a second. I mean, first, you said you had some things that you wanted to bring to us as possible steps moving forward. And so I want to be the point of contact for that, if you don't mind.
Sure.
And then we can absolutely review the robocalls and see how clear they were. Because if they were not clear to everyone that received them, then we've got to learn from that. But I do know, going back and forth, that was the goal before coming into Thursday, to let everyone know that we had figured out who this was and that we knew that there was no real threat. If that did not come across, then we have to learn from that and figure that out. But I do believe there were robocalls that went out. We just need to get down to those details.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
I wanted to add, when you say there's no real threat, that's easy said than done. But when you have 1,700 students that receive that, and still a student who actually was a target that never really to this day, have not received a follow-up from school police who actually came to his home. I just feel like we can do a lot better than just saying it was no threat and that was it. And even with mentioning not giving excused absence, there were people that were very traumatized by this call or by the media, the viral message that was going around, to just say, that's it. And if we're saying robocall, a lot of them are not getting through. So a lot of people are not getting it. What else can we do? I graduated in '98, and there's a lot of things that can be done differently that I still do not see. From, as we stated, the security part. I don't know if the robocall or what else can be done, but everything from the doors, I think just making sure that we, from this day forward, if we can partner up and make sure that we remain partners, because it feels like we're talking about the same thing over. Even when I was the PTA president, we're talking about the same things that are going on. I sat with Principal Langston and her supervisor with my family member, and I have to keep going back because I'm really upset that he did not get a follow-up or even an apology or anything. In fact, the school police said that they will be coming to this meeting, and they never showed. So I feel as though we could say no real threat, but we have to make sure that this does not happen again, or we find a way to make sure that we're reaching these parents.
I agree with you, and I just want to say I apologize that this happened this way, right? It was, to Dr. Santelises' point, the perfect storm, right? We had folks on vacation, the school was shut down, and then this drops, right? We'll get this better. We're not perfect, but we want to work with you to get this better. And so we'll get better at it. We'll work with you to do it. I'm hoping that staff hears from the board perspective that we want you to work with this group of volunteers to help get this communication the way it should be.
We have a wonderful principal at this school.
I'm glad you like
And
her.
that she's laying out a lot of training for the students
Okay.
in case of something actually happened at the school. And we have a great PTA and a very energetic president here.
Very much.
And so in a way, it's brought a lot of us together in very positive ways. And we just want to improve the communications from Central to us. But inside that school, we're doing great, and we just need your continued support. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Our last speaker tonight is Ms. Kim Trueheart.
Hey, 3 minutes is not enough. Okay. Higher class sizes is not an option. Got that?
Say that again, say that again.
Higher class sizes is not an option. I can't think of one good reason to increase class sizes. Not one. Okay? All right. Let's talk about absenteeism. I've been working with a parent, and I've mentioned this previously, who has experienced what I am defining as significant trauma in her life, which means her children are experiencing great trauma, which means her children are absent during this great trauma. I am proud to say that last night at Baltimore City Council, the Trauma Responsive Care Act was passed, and all of these city agencies are going to now be trauma informed. And y'all going to treat children with respect and appreciate the trauma that they're growing up with. You're going to put in place all the right supports and structures, and you're not going to be skimpy about it. I am so thankful, right? Yeah? Right? Yeah, okay. Also last night, the City Council introduced a bill about jobs, of all things. And I was in the other room earlier and I heard y'all talking about contracts, and Dr. Santalisa says she met with the head of Whiting Turner and y'all are talking jobs. Do you know how proud that makes me? Because kids who graduate from Baltimore City Public Schools are supposed to be what? College and career ready, right? And I'm not seeing that. So y'all better figure out how to get these kids when they graduate and they're not going to college, get them a job, okay? And we're spending, how big is your budget? 1.3 billion? 1.3 billion. And a good percentage of that goes to contractors who don't hire little black children. Fix it. Fix it. And when a kid graduates out of one of these CTE programs, if they ain't got a job lined up, y'all have failed. Hear me? Failed. Right? I haven't said y'all fired in a long time, but I'm about to start bringing that back again, because as of this point, if I run into another child who said they graduated from Mervo or Carver and they don't have a job or they don't have something in sight for a job, Kim Trueheart's going to be on the warpath, serious warpath, okay? So City Council passed a bill y'all need to look at last night about construction jobs, 15 million and above, and all kinds of stuff to ensure opportunities for city residents. I'm more specifically concerned about city school graduates. Got that?
Time's expired.
I'm done.
Okay.
I'm done.
Perfect
I'm
time. All right. Thank you. Thank you.
Jobs. Jobs. Real jobs. I don't want no more unemployed high school graduates. None. Find them jobs.
Okay. So to my commissioners, after hearing the public comment, are there any additional questions that you may have?
Yes, I have questions about IKEA in
Okay.
terms of student promotions, or I call it social promotions, but maybe I can talk about it.
Okay. Christian, how does that work? Will they come up now? Oh, okay. Thank you. Which staff? Is that Angela? Oh, okay. IKE. Who? Oh, okay, I'm sorry. Dr. Brooks has a question too.
This isn't for consent. So should we see IKEA first before we do the consent?
Dr. Frank. What am I doing, Christian? Okay.
Answer the question about IKEA.
Okay. So should we hear what Dr. Brooks's question is first before we go to the presentation from staff? Okay, thank you. Dr. Brooks.
Great, thank you. I just had a couple of questions regarding changes in adjusting pay scales, particularly around what guiding principles and practices actually inform those decisions in terms of addressing or adjusting pay scales. Are there particular windows of time in which adjusting a pay scale and then a change happens? Is there any particular guidance, whether it's local, state, federal guidance that sort of would dictate what that looks like? And then particularly around, similarly to the question that Dr. Santalisa asked of BARD, how do we address some of the issues on a case-by-case basis in terms of ensuring that those case-by-cases are not sort of more impacting particular populations of people versus some other people in this process? And particularly, and also just in the spirit of transparency, like where do we do that level of work in terms of ensuring that all of those steps are clear, outlined, and in accordance with larger governance policies?
So did the staff get that? Okay, and before they come, I want to also ask, I'm sorry, before the staff comes, I also want to ask one more time, given the public comment, are there any other things that you may want to remove from consent? Commissioner Frank.
I'd like to remove 8.03, Bard High School, early college, the waiver request.
Okay.
And I also wanted to ask a question in addition to Commissioner Brooks. Do we know how the Baltimore Bard admissions criteria, the essay and the interview compares with Bard early, sorry? Yeah.
Is it? So we
The
have
en-
Commissioner,
the enrollment.
we have
The
8.03
way-
and 8.08.
8.0
Oh.
are removed.
This is about the admissions criteria.
That's already
Okay,
removed.
so, that's
Okay.
08,
And then I had an additional question
about 03.
about the admissions criteria.
Oh, okay. So then we're going to keep
Apologize.
03 at this point within consent, and 08 will answer both your questions.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, perfect. All right, now we'll have staff. For IKEA, IKEA. I had to say it, I had to say it.
Good evening. I'm Rachel Pfeiffer. I'm the Executive Director of College and Career Readiness.
And I'm Danny Heller, the Manager of College and Career Readiness.
Just to make sure, I want to make sure we're answering the questions appropriately. I know there was a specific question about kind of social promotion related to the regulations, but could you repeat the last question, Commissioner Brooks?
Yeah,
Oh, sorry.
let me
Yes,
give you
Reed. I'm sorry.
my slant. I guess in terms of the mechanisms are being set in place where, at least in the lower grades, there are less impediments to be promoted.
Mhm.
So if in the lower grades you have less impediments to be promoted, there's a possibility in the higher grades they will be less successful and you'll have negative growth in terms of promotion because they may not be ready. And we worry a lot about, we talk about CTEs, we talk about college readiness. So by, I guess, we're removing the needle. I guess these are multiple questions. Are we moving the needle where we're not even managing for the middle anymore? We're managing for the bottom because we're trying to make less successful kids successful. So therefore, what happens to the rest of the student population? The other thing I talked about, like I said, was the negative growth in terms of higher grades, in terms of promotion and ability to be competitive. That's my second question. And I guess the third is there such thing as social promotions?
Great. Thank you for raising these questions. So to clarify, just for those who may not have seen the specific regulation change, the regulation previously stated that students who failed math or English or science or social studies in the lower grades could be retained. The language said should, with the intention that schools would not necessarily see retention as the first option, but that it was a possibility. What we saw was that retention was being used across the board whenever there was a failure in any of those areas. And so now the language says that a student, that we do not want students, the philosophy of the district is that retention shouldn't be the first option, right? And that if a student fails math or English and another core subject, math, English, science, and social studies, they can be retained, but it's through conversation that needs to happen with the principal supervisor. To your initial point, I think when we're thinking about what that actually looks like in practice, your question about kind of managing to the bottom would be the reality if we hadn't changed anything else. But what we did at the same time that we adjusted the policy and the regulation specifically is that we actually started working to develop a more comprehensive approach for helping students get the interventions that they needed in order to help them get back on track. So previously, if a student were to fail social studies in 4th grade, they would be held back. Part of what we're saying now is what is the school doing? What has the school demonstrated that they've put in place? both in terms of communication with parents early on, in terms of gathering a group of educators around that student and wraparound supports to be able to figure out what the student needs in order to address that area where they're struggling academically. And how do we really shore up our processes so that it's not just a question of is a student failing or not, but have we intervened early enough in the process so that students don't have to fail because we've helped them along the way. So that's the intention of the way that the regulation has shifted. I do think that there will always be a question, and we will be looking at students ensuring that students are getting the content that they need. I think when we've changed our literacy curriculum, you see that we were really intentional about increasing rigor. So we're not just trying to make things easier just to push students along. We've increased the rigor of our content across the board in a variety of different areas, but at the same time, we wanted to recognize that learning is a process that may not necessarily happen just within the school year timing that we have, and we didn't want to harm students by holding them back unnecessarily just because their learning wasn't fully completed between the September and June time that they were in the classroom. We want to continue to work with them to help them progress.
The other thing that I'll add is once a student is behind and has failed, one of the questions that we have to ask is what is the best environment for that student once they are behind in order to catch up. So as a former teacher, I taught 17-year-old seventh graders who had been retained several times, and it was clear to me even earlier in my career that that was not the best place for that particular student who might have been on the seventh grade or lower level in terms of what he had achieved at that point in time. But he would be better served in a classroom with peers closer to his age. So in one sense, you're right. Students do get caught up, might get caught up. We'll have to see many years down the road, more in high school than they had been previously. That's something we've already seen with the data prior to this. At the same time, we feel that we're giving them the best shot to succeed in classrooms with students closer to their peers' age. And one other point to Dr. Pfeiffer's point about rigor is we've also implemented at the same time a more rigorous grading policy. So and it's a more consistent standard across the district of what it means to master content or to pass classes. So our grades will hopefully be more communicative of where students are and where they need to go so that we can have those conversations, those better conversations that Dr. Pfeiffer talked about at the school level. Thank you.
Thank you. Do any other commissioners have any questions for these two?
Just for the benefit of the public, since it wasn't on the agenda, you all know what we're doing. The board receives compliance reports. There's kind of like reports of how certain policy implementation is going. So this kind of stemmed from the executive meeting, which is why we're discussing it publicly now.
Thank you, Mr. Gant. Now to the staff to address Dr. Brooks's question concerning the salary steps.
Good evening. First, I would say, just to make sure that I am, I guess, narrowing on the question you're asking appropriately. So in terms of the scales themselves, 98% of our employees are affiliated with a union, and therefore the scales are negotiated with unions. So, what someone's salary can be and how they move salaries over time is dictated by those agreements. The place where there is a decision that is made within the Human Capital Office is in terms of where someone is placed when they are hired as a new employee. And we have a compensation policy, GBCA, and the regulation for policy GBCA indicates that the Human Capital Office is responsible for outlining the process used to determine placement of new employees on salary scales. Part of the question was whether there's a particular cadence to reviewing what that process is, and the answer is no. There's not an annual timeline or a biannual timeline. The district considers various things, including how to make sure we're competitive with other districts when doing that. So I'll give a couple of examples. When we hire new teachers, the district for some time has given credit for previous experience as a paraeducator. So if someone has been a paraeducator for every 2 years they were a paraeducator, we give them credit for 1 year of teaching experience when they're placed onto the salary scale. And the other example I'll give is before July of 2018, the district had the process outlined for placing people onto the teacher salary scale when they were hired as a new employee went up to like the 10th step. And we recognized that made it very difficult for us to compete for experienced teachers who had been working in other districts because they had moved on their district salary scales to a place that was higher than that, which means they're not going to choose to come to Baltimore City from another district to take a significant pay cut. So that's one time when the process for assigning individual placement changed is in July of 2018 in order to make sure we could be competitive.
Thank you for that. And is there like any sort of set standard for determining that last part that you spoke specifically about in terms of, all of a sudden, because we saw that we're not being competitive in this area, we had to witness some sort of dynamic or some sort of thing? Is there like a threshold or anything substantive that suggests that we need to do that? Like, do y'all do some analyses or like what goes into that?
Sure, we looked at the number of candidates we were hiring as new teachers who were coming to us as veteran educators from other districts, and that number was very low. We just looked at this data a week ago, looking back to last school year, and saw that we had increased by like 30% last school year compared to the prior school year, candidates who were newly hired as teachers who were coming from other districts with experience. Yes, there are things that we look at in the process, mostly I would say to make sure that we can be competitive. I realize I didn't answer another of your questions, which is actually the process we've outlined is standard, so there are no individual exceptions. It's not that we're looking on a case-by-case basis at someone's experience and deciding whether to count 2 years of their experience or 5 years of their experience. If they have 5 years of experience, depending on what degree they have, that tells where they will begin on the salary scale.
Thank you for that.
You're welcome.
Okay, so we vote the consent? I'm sorry, I'm getting some clarification right now. We're going to talk about the ones we pulled. Okay. All right, so Commissioner McFadden pulled 8.02, which is the resident agent update request.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chairman. It was simple. We're changing the resident agent from who it previously was, our former chief legal officer, and it is now changing. I just wanted to know what that process was, who is now the resident agent for us as registered with the state. I was just curious. I've never seen this before since I've been on the board, so that was my question, to see that conversion over from the previous resident agent to whoever is serving in that capacity now, because we didn't get that. I don't think we saw. We just saw that it was changed.
Office of Legal Counsel, it has not been changed. Currently, the resident agent is Tammy Turner, who's no longer the chief legal counsel for Baltimore
Can you
City
say that
Schools.
again? I'm having
Currently, the
trouble.
resident agent is Tammy Turner, who's no longer employed by Baltimore City Board of School Commissioners. Pursuant to the Corporations Article of the Maryland Annotated Code, Section 1-208, we're required to have a resident agent. It has to be updated, or we need consent from the person as the resident agent. We do not have that consent. Thus, we're no longer in legal compliance with the law. So what-
I'm sorry. Could you just speak a little more directly in the mic? Because
Sure, I'm
we're
sorry.
having-
Can you hear me better now?
That's better. Thank you.
Okay. Going back for a second. So Tammy Turner, who's been chief legal counsel for 13 years, has been the resident agent. That's why we haven't seen a change in 13 years, because she's been in that position. Since she's resigned, we have not updated that information with the Maryland.
So is there
We have not updated that information with the Maryland State Department of Assessment and Taxation.
so our vote this evening is just to remove Tammy as the resident agent?
Correct, so that we can update that information.
Okay.
Is there a name to replace it, or is it
We don't
okay
have
if
that
it's
yet.
not? Because I didn't really hear that. but-
Temporarily would be me until we name a permanent chief legal counsel.
Gotcha.
Thank you.
Gotcha. Thank you. So with that clarity, why don't we go ahead and vote for that? So can I get a motion to approve 8.02? Moved by Commissioner Reed. Can I get a second?
Second.
Second by Commissioner McFadden. All in favor, say your name.
McFadden?
Richardson.
Frank?
So that's 8 approved, 1 absent. Perfect. All right, then 8.0, oh, I'm sorry, we're gonna, for the purposes of clarity, we're gonna skip the other ones in section 8 because Angela Alvarez is coming to present, and we're gonna look at those as a full group. So why don't we move to section 12, procurement. 12.01, there was a request to remove that. NCS Pearson, there were questions.
Hello again, still Rachel Pfeiffer, Executive Director of College and Career Readiness.
Joe Vogel, Interim Director of Procurement.
Thank you, Dr. Pfeiffer. I just wanted to clarify with this, it's not a lot of money, you know, for some things we get. But we know that our rates of certification for our CTE programs are not 100%. And that some schools have a higher pass rate for certain certifications than others. So first, I'm wondering if you have just some basic information on the sort of under the big CTE certificate. As I'm reading this is for more like subsets of certifications. And then, you know, it's what, $1,000 to $5,000 per site for the license.
Right.
Would it make more sense to have a central location because it's a relatively small number of students, or am I wrong that it's a small number of students?
So just in looking at the certification rates for the Microsoft Office suite, we've got about an 89% pass rate for that, and that's of concentrators, so students who are in the third pathway.
Right, and so I'm going to like channel my inner Dr. Bundima here. So how many students is that?
That's a great question. I will send that to you. I don't have that right here, but I can get that to you. I'll get that. I don't
Okay,
want to guess. And I'll also get you the number. It's about a 68% for the Adobe software. And again, I'll get you the exact numbers. Great question. Thanks for asking it earlier about whether we could do one site. I checked with the team, and we reached out to Pearson to see what the cap is for each site. That would be one limitation to consider. The other is that we are always looking at about $600 to $800 per bus. So we just need to think through just the efficiency of having students be able to do it on site at their school versus having to pay for buses to take them out to another location, and we can definitely look at that. So when we find out what the cap is for a single site, we can share that as well.
And most of those are online exams, yes?
Yes.
So they could be at Baltimore City Schools at any location, yes? Or does each location need a site license?
Each location needs a site license. So we actually have been looking through, as we shift different buildings and the way we use our facilities around the district, we've been looking at trying to create a centralized site for some of the tests. There are some cases where it really could be convenient and a better use of the computer infrastructure we have in order to do that. So glad you brought it up because it was already something we're thinking about. We just have to see again what the cap for that specific site license would be.
Okay, thank you.
Yep, absolutely.
Appreciate that.
All right, so,
I'll move approval.
okay, so, golly, thank you. Commissioner Hassan has moved to approve 12.01. Is there a second? Second by Commissioner Reed. All in favor? Richardson? That is 8 approved, 1 absent. We'll move to 14.01, Plant and Moran. Yeah, there were some questions.
I think Commissioner Frank was also in question. You want to ask the question since you were on the operation committee? You know, I was really concerned by a statement that was in there in reference to waiver with MBE, WBE waivers, and also, does that mean that the contractor does not or did not include minority contractors in the huh?
The RFP.
Yeah, I mean, RFP. I just was unclear about that. It shouldn't take long for.
My name's Michael Smith, MBE consultant. As part, what occurred was a pre-solicitation waiver request.
Could you speak a little louder?
There was a pre-solicitation waiver request. As such, on this contract, there is no MBE participation.
Oh, I didn't understand why, and why would that occur?
Because they made a request, this is very detailed and very specific. Normally, on contracts, we try to achieve the city goal of 27 and 10. We try to do that with all contracts. But on this one, it was very specialized and detailed need that MBEs necessarily at this point could not participate in. Coming from the,
I'm just looking at it from the legal point of view, and when you know that we have a percentage of, we have to have a percentage of minority contractors who have to participate. Like, what is it, 29%? And how do we get away with that?
on the city side, it's 27 for
27 is-
MBE and 10% for WBE on the city
Okay.
side.
How do
Now,
they?
well, it's required that we have an opportunity for waivers as well as pre-solicitation waivers. So that's all part of the opportunity. A lot of times the prime contractor comes aboard, and with the need for the city schools, what we review on our side, we'll review the scope of services, look at the detailed scope of services. We talk to the procurement people, we talk to whoever will be affected by this contract. And what was described to us was there was a need at this point, in this phase of the process, for a very specialized subset, very specialized. Now, going down the road, once the implementation occurs, we expect significant MBE participation.
And you know, and I think you guys do a great job evaluating, and you know your stuff. I just think that when it gets to the board, when we're looking at what you send or what you say is happening, when we know from previous experiences what needs to be done legally or not legal, I don't know, because I'm layman here. But it's not enough information to understand why. You know, so when we vote, and we, you know, like you said, specialize, it's critical things going on while it's why there's a waiver. But for a person that's reading this, I really would like to know what is it that's allowing a waiver. You see what I mean? Instead of just voting on what you said, which I trust. But we have to have information as to why, when we know that there's issues concerned with hiring minority contractors or minority businesses.
So
You know what
we-
I'm saying? Wait a minute, Kim, let me handle this. Okay, okay. So I'm just saying that you do a great job with it, but I think that we just need more information
So-
to be able to vote and say yes or no. You see
So
what I'm going?
what you're
And
asking
I'm
from
not
us-
saying you're doing a bad job. I just feel like when we get a document, we just need to know more information, that's all.
I hear
Got
what
it?
you're saying, so perhaps in the future, when a waiver is granted, or maybe even a reduction in the normal amount, we get more detailed information as opposed to normally put down the scope of services does not allow, and then we stop there. But clearly, we have more detailed information
Right.
available to us.
Right.
So perhaps going forward, we can provide
I'm
additional
sorry, speak a
information.
little louder. I'm having old age issues.
Perhaps going forward, we can provide additional information to you when there's a waiver or a partial waiver granted.
Can I also suggest that when we were at audit committee, we talked about this a little bit, and you talked about the segmentation process and why this would or would not follow, work under the segmentation process. Can you talk a little bit about what made this contract more complex to do, to segment it in order to meet some of the MBE, WBE goals of at least portions of it?
Okay. Hello, everyone. Senior Legal Assistant Gary Atkinson. During that meeting, I talked about the difficulty with putting a goal on this contract, mainly because we reached out to Chief Sashi and determined that it was such a specialized need in this area, and that the timing deadline and the other complexities with the contract is why we move forward with not putting a goal on it. We are very, very aggressive at putting goals on contracts. As the best of our ability, we try to get as much participation from the MBE community as we can on contracts, and also we try to get these vendors to become eventually MBE proms in the program. That's the whole purpose behind this program. We go to outreach events. We engage with small MBE businesses. We teach them how to go for what they call the low-hanging fruit. The contract is under 24/5, and try to partner them with larger firms like Dustin or Whiting Turner or such to establish relationships going forward, to make it easier for some of these prime contractors to meet with MBEs or MBEs to get work on some of these other contracts.
I would suggest that, and I'm gonna make this really quick, I would suggest that if you had that kind of problem reaching out to minority contractors, then you need to have some kind of meeting, bringing them aboard, the Maryland minority contractors or all the contractors, and bring them and say what you just said, because sometimes I understand that sometimes you can't find any that's qualified to do the work. I'm clear on that. But then after everything is done, then you'll have a contractor come forward and say, I didn't get that information, I didn't get, and some of, for whatever reason, didn't get that communication. I just think that we need to clean it up and throw it away so we won't have this problem ever again, is to bring them together and say, what can we do to make sure that you have the information that you need, and we can make sure that we comply with all the rules and regulations, and we don't have to have a waiver again.
All right, I want to shift to Commissioner Frank, who also has questions here.
Thanks. This was, thank you, following up on your comments, Commissioner Bondima. This was discussed at the Operations Committee, and I guess I have less questions about the segmentation process as much as the pre-solicitation waiver. Because I wonder if how we make that judgment. Number one, that there is no segmentation possibilities. I guess we look through a directory of local MBEs and we've determined that this particular service, this project management service, cannot be provided by an MBE or WBE sub. We've made that determination by looking at a directory, I assume. And the second question is, in our effort to try to build prime contractors, if we had not included a pre-solicitation waiver, would we have given a smaller MWBE contractor the ability to joint venture with a larger prime so that the smaller subcontractor would have the ability to access this large contract, learn in the process, and participate in a valuable and genuine way. So I guess my question is, the decision the judgment to waive any participation prior to the solicitation so that we didn't even really send the signal that we'd like to see some effort for participation either through segmentation or through joint venture.
Typically, what occurs with a pre-solicitation is it comes from procurement, and they would detail why they need. It come to our office, we'll review it. It's not limited to just the looking for directory of certified firms. That's one of the major things that we use. But again, we also look at the scope of services, how detailed. We might look at it if it's an immediate need they can't wait. We look at a lot of different variables, but ultimately, again, we want, as Gary clearly said, we want MB participation everywhere if we can have it. But sometimes it comes down that, again, a pre-solicitation waiver where there is no opportunities. We determine there's no opportunities. Again, on this particular project, is this on this initial phase that there's no opportunity for MB to segment to MBE. It's such a specialized project, and it's an immediate need for our schools. That wasn't an exclusive reason for the waiver. That was one of the considerations.
Had there not been a time factor, there may have been some consideration for not issuing a waiver prior to the solicitation?
The way the scope of service is detailed to us, it probably would still have been a waiver.
I'm sorry, what was the last?
It may have still been a waiver. I don't know. But that was one of the factors that we looked at.
Dr. Santelises.
So what I'd like to do is kind of charge staff in this case, like the themes I'm hearing from both questions, both Commissioner Frank and Commissioner Bondima, speak to me of the need first to make sure that we are being more proactive in our communication about our processes with MBEs and WBEs. Like I think we just need to be in a proactive state because given the posture that you all are coming to this with of, you know, being welcoming, having a positive frame of mind, I think we're at the stage where in implementation, the translation of that desire to have kind of diverse business participation needs to move to the next level. And I think we saw a similar pattern even in our relationships with city nonprofit contractors that we were partnering with regards to federal and Title I dollars, and some of the same themes that Commissioner Bondima raised around people not having the information, and so that even though our intent might be to have a broad net of opportunity, our communication of that needs to move to a deeper level. So I think, one, I would say to staff, I think we need to spend some time ahead of time thinking about what that might look like and take some lessons from some of our partners that come through the federal funding area where we heard similar themes. I think the second piece that I'm taking away, particularly from Commissioner Frank's questioning, is the need to review in real time what actually are the factors that are being given as reasons for why someone might need a waiver. And I think one of the things that we know as a system is that oftentimes our well intent does not always translate in implementation. And so I think we need to come up with a way of communicating the data so that we can demonstrate, being an audit committee or operations committee, how we are tracking our own use of waivers, because an overabundance of waivers without context, which, you all brought great context, it was very helpful, but if the data is saying that we find good reasons for an over-representative sample of MBE and WBE waivers, then I think that's a signal that we need to take a deeper look and to not wait until the time pressure. And as a former, chief in this organization prior to being CEO, I get that the normal everyday work has a lot of things where time could be used as the rationale for why we don't do the deeper look. And so that's why I'm urging us to carve out some time cross-departmentally and cross-functionally. I know that operations has had some procurement discussions, and it cuts across the organization, that we be in a proactive posture ahead of time in really thinking about how are we charting some of the time crunch pressures and other reasons. Are we coding what those reasons are? So, for example, when you said even if it hadn't been for the time pressure, the waiver still might have been granted, what are the actual reasons that would trigger a waiver? Very much, frankly, the same way we do with student conduct data. We've done the same thing in a different part of the organization where we check ourselves through the monitoring of our own data to make sure that the well-intentions, the good intentions that we have are actually translating in practice. And two, it helps with transparency and communication with the larger public. So I do think that we've got some data work to do. I think that there's some kind of proactive analysis work we need to do. And then third, we really need to go kind of to the next level when it comes actually communicating with partners. And one of the things that I do know from other sectors is when you want to increase representation for those parties who are not traditionally represented, part of what that requires is extra diligence on the communication of what the requirements are, what the standards are. And I too have heard chatter. It's not just you, Commissioner Bondima. I mean, I too get chatter when I'm out in the public about, what is it that helps us qualify or not qualify? Knowing that there will always be places where we just don't have the kind of diversity we want. I think we need to do some work on the communication end. So I would just say, there may be other takeaways, but as I'm sitting here listening in some of the themes, I think that there's some follow-up that we can do and report back to the board.
Good. Thank you.
Commissioner James is on.
So, to Dr. S's point about sometimes we can use time as the reason for why we have to expedite these things, this is one of the reasons that we've been working on pushing the procurement policy a little longer. And these are the kinds of things that I think we're looking to see in that policy codified. And so if that becomes, given the discussion tonight, a need to postpone that policy further to allow the different divisions to dig in deeply and see what this might look like for them, I'm sure we can work together. I'll speak for the policy committee, but get a nod, that if we need to give it some more time so that it can be the kind of policy so that these discussions are more codified by what the board wants going into things.
And Commissioner Reed has the final say on this.
I mean, the commissioner and the CEO both talked about time. I guess my question to you is, I've been hearing that this has to be done now. Say we hold it off for 6 months or 3 months, wherein we could try to rebid and try to bring in WMBs under the tent. Is that doable? If not, why?
Currently, our ERP system is Oracle, and they've told us that as of December 31st of 2021, they will no longer support it. As of this point, our timeline is to be totally live by July 1 of 2022. So at this point, we'll be roughly 6 months.
Repeat that again, please.
Okay.
We never heard this.
Okay. Currently, our ERP system from Oracle is due to be it will not be supported as of December 31st of 2021. And right now, our timeline is to be totally live July 1 of 2022. So we will be 6 months without support from Oracle at this point. If we push this back any further, we may not be live until, July of 23. So we wind up being maybe a year to a year and a half without support of an ERP system.
Okay, do the commissioners have enough information to vote on this? No. You ready to vote? Okay. Can I have a motion? That's where I was going. Can I have a motion to approve 14.01? Approved by Commissioner Reed. Is there a second? Second by Commissioner Roberts. All in favor? Richardson? So that's 4 approved. I should say, are there any oppositions? Say your name. Okay, so 1, Bondima, did you oppose? Okay, okay, and opposed, so that's 3 opposed. And so it does not pass, and one abstention, okay, and 1 absent, does not pass. Okay. At this point, I want to vote on the consent items, right? So that's everything that we are putting in by consent. Is there a motion to approve all of the consent items remaining? Motion moved by Commissioner Brooks. You- So we didn't get there yet. So that's not a part of the consent. Yeah, you can vote for this because those are going to be pulled. That's not a part of what we're voting on now. Oh, jeez. Okay. All right, for clarification for the public, we are voting on the consent items, which include all of number 8 is going to be presented to us by Angela Alvarez. So that is not a part of this vote, okay? It includes 12, I'm sorry, we just voted 12, we voted 14.1. It includes 14.02. It includes 15.01 and 15.02. Those are our consent items.
No, Commissioner, some of 8 was not pulled, so
Oh.
just so we're all on the same page.
I'm sorry.
So 8.01, 8.03, and 8.05, and 8.06 were
I'm
not
sorry.
pulled.
You are correct. You are correct. So let me do that over. We are voting right now for 8.01, 8.03, 8.05, 8.06, 14.02, 15.01, and 15.02. Yes, ma'am.
I was actually waiting for Angela's presentation before we did 8.06, so can we?
So you want to remove that from consent, and okay, we can do that. Which one are you removing again? 8.06. Okay. Okay, we're going to get this right. So we are now voting for 8.01, 8.03, 8.05, 14.02, 15.01, and 15.02. Can I get a motion to approve those consent items? Moved by Commissioner Frank. Can I get a second? Second by Commissioner Bondima. All in favor? Richardson? Okay, so that is 8 approved with 1 absent. All right. So now we are going to have a presentation by Ms. Alvarez.
Good evening, everyone. Good evening,
Good evening.
Board Commissioners. I'm Angela Alvarez. I'm the Executive Director of the Office of New Initiatives.
And I'm Trevor Roberts. I'm a specialist in the Office of New Initiatives.
I just, that happened really fast, so I feel like you only want to see certain, you don't want, do you want to see the whole presentation or just certain schools? The whole thing? Okay. Got confused about that. Okay. All right, so we will go.
Okay, so just as a reminder to the public, this is a presentation for waiver requests for operator-led schools. These requests were presented to the board on the January 14th meeting, and we're coming back now for the vote. Just a quick overview of the process. Operator-led schools can apply for waivers of board policy, and when that happens, staff looks at some considerations, the evidence of the demand and capacity to implement the change, the school's rationale about how the change meets the school need, evidence of how stakeholders were involved in vetting and approving the request, the quality of the programming offered by the school and the building capacity. Staff vets the requests with different offices in the building and with the Charter and Operator-led Advisory Board. And the CEO makes a recommendation to the board whether to approve or to deny the request. The first request we're going to look at are the enrollment capacity requests. The first request comes from Bard High School, Early College. So Christian, should we go over these, or was this approved by consent? Okay. So this was approved by consent just now. So we're going to look at the request from Elmarie Henderson. Okay. So the school made a request to expand their enrollment in the upper elementary grades and in middle school. The school wants to ensure that they have room for their elementary grade students to matriculate into middle school. And right now, the elementary grades have more enrollment than the middle school grades have capacity to take. So they are making requests to expand that capacity and to expand the middle grade programming in relation to that.
And I just want to add another thing, just so we're super clear. The expansion around upper elementary grades is to get to what they now see as their ideal size. And at the middle grades is even a little bit larger because they would like to eventually be like a receiver for other communities. So be enough for their school population to go into middle grades, but have space to accept students from other areas.
And a few things to note about this request is that the school made a proposal for adding staff depending on how much extra enrollment they receive. And one thing that makes this a little more of a difficult question is that the school has an enrollment zone which sits on portions of several of the neighborhood zone schools. So as you can see, the request was for an additional 117 students by the time the enrollment is fully expanded. In talking with the school, we talked to them about the effect on the neighborhood schools and how the enrollment in those schools is changing. So in order to take that into account, staff has recommended an increase of smaller increase that would go up to 42 students over the next 3 years. This would allow the school to allow all of their rising elementary students to matriculate into middle school, and the school has indicated that this increase in enrollment would allow them to make the programmatic changes that they would like. We would like to come back in the future and reconsider further expansion of the school, but we would like to see how this increase affects the neighborhood schools before we do that. One last thing that I want to mention with this is that
The other thing is the school part of this is they are building out classrooms within their school space. The recommendation is to approve a smaller increase. The school is supportive of that request, so that's what the recommendation is.
Okay, next is 806, KIP, Commissioner Roberts had some questions.
No, wait, were there questions with this one?
This one was fine, we just needed to vote separate.
Okay. Okay. Are you gonna vote on, do you wanna vote on this before we go to the next one?
Why don't we do that?
Okay.
Christian, we're gonna vote on Henderson Hopkins. And we're pulling this for vote, right? So I just need a motion to approve 8.04. Moved by Commissioner James Hassan, second. Second by Commissioner Brooks, all in favor? Say your name, please. Richardson? Any opposed? Any abstain? So that's 6 approved, 1 abstention, 2 absent.
Okay, so we're gonna go to KIP. One thing too, just for the record, for all of these requests, they're vetted through the advisory board. They were shared with the CEO. Most of our recommendations, except for this one that we're gonna talk about, are consistent with the advisory board's recommendation, and I'm gonna.
Ms.
into
Alvarez,
detail
could
about-
you, particularly for the KIP enrollment capacity request, please distinguish between what the
Yes.
original,
Yes.
thank you, recommendation from the
I
advisory
just
board
wanted to be on the
was?
record about the other
Okay,
ones.
no, I just want
Yes.
everybody to be clear on what the official recommendations were and anything subsequent to that. Thank you.
Yeah, and so including with Almer, that the advisory board recommended just the middle grades expansion part, like how we did. Okay. So for KIP submitted a request to add an additional 108 students to their school, making their school population 1626. Their request, the rationale for the request was around meeting a significant funding gap. This is a school that has received a 5-year renewal. The school indicates the increase in enrollment would be handled by increasing class sizes. So this is just all coming from their information. And they also indicated no additional staff would be added as a result of this request. And they said that without this request, they would need to cut staffing. The school did engage the school community. They got 550 signatures in support. The facility has space to accommodate the request. We vetted this with the new charter and operator-led schools advisory board and shared that recommendation with Dr. Santelises. Their recommendation was not to approve it. They did not find the budget consideration compelling or concerned about the impact on school climate. And so for those reasons, they were a no on this particular request. Sorry, I went too far in what I'm looking at, sorry. Some of the considerations is that this school does have a large administrative staff. They have 2 principals and 7 APs. So it's a level of staffing that's beyond similarly sized schools within the district. The school's rationale was not focused on how this would improve student outcomes. So that was something that we looked at. The level of operator staffing, so originally we thought it was higher, and we updated that. We understand it's more consistent with what's happening in KIP DC. However, when we're looking at KIP Baltimore in comparison to KIP schools in other places, Baltimore, the Maryland charter law is very different in Maryland, and so the responsibilities are different. So in KIP locations in other places, those other places are running multiple school locations, and they're responsible for many of the things that a district is responsible for, like transporting students and lunch and a whole host of other kinds of responsibilities that are not the responsibilities of KIP Baltimore. However, there is a difference in their model. So the recommendation is to allow them to increase, but only to increase by 54 students.
Gotcha. Were there any other questions about KIP? If not, can I have a motion to approve 8.06. So moved by Commissioner Reed, a second. Second by Commissioner Bondima. All in favor? Richardson? That's 6 approved. Are there any opposed?
McFadden.
2 opposed. 6 approved, 2 opposed, and 1 absent. It moves, right? It passes. Okay. 8.07, Tunbridge is just for a vote.
Just for a vote, okay.
Yep. Can I make a motion to approve 8.07? Moved by Commissioner Brooks. I'm sorry, it's getting late. Is there a second? Second by Commissioner Reed. All in favor?
McFadden.
Richardson? I'm sorry. I'm not supposed to vote on that. I'm sorry. Let's do that again. Moved by Commissioner Brooks, seconded by Commissioner Bondima, right? Oh, Commissioner Reed. All in favor. Let's do that again.
McFadden.
Okay. I'm not opposed, I'm abstaining. So that's 7 approved, 1 abstained, and 1 absent. Okay.
Okay.
So 8.08.
Yeah, so this is Bard High School, Early College, Baltimore's admissions request. So this isn't a CAP request, it's a different kind of request. They, as you heard testimony earlier today, are requesting the ability to modify their admissions process to be able to consider middle school attendance. Part of their rationale, and I think you heard a bit about that, is around their concerns about, they believe there's a relationship between middle school attendance and and actual performance at Bard once students arrive at Bard High School. They currently have an admission process that is based on an interview and a writing sample to determine students' eligibility for its accelerated programming. They indicate that they would not set a threshold based on attendance rate, but would use it as another factor in conjunction with the interview and the writing sample. The school has the ability to implement an admissions process as they do so today. And they vetted it with their staff, their students, and their local advisory group. With this recommendation, staff is recommending that the board not approve it. And there are a few reasons, and again, it's consistent with the advisory board's recommendation. So one of the things that came into play when Bard was first originally approved as a school was thinking about the number of entrance seats that we have for entrance criteria or selective seats that we have in the district. So they came into a district, and we still sort of have that issue where we have a higher proportion of seats that are that have selection, that have criteria, that have barriers for students. And so part of their original design and their original methodology for us was around having a more inclusive way of determining whether or not students were a good fit. The other thing, within their request, part of what they flagged as the concern wasn't just around students being absent from school, but students who were skipping school and skipping classes. In addition to this request, you already approved the reduction in size, which is about getting at some of the right sizing their climate and being able to be more supportive of schools. Additionally, it doesn't come to you because it's it's on the administrative house, but they've asked for special consideration and administrative transfer requests, which are requests that come from school leaders to leadership for students with academic concerns. And so those are things that we're already kind of dealing with to kind of help with that. Our concern, or the similar concerns that I've heard from the board members earlier tonight, is that this could be used to exclude students who would benefit from Bard's programming. And there's a lot that they're putting in place, that they're still putting in place. And we think it makes sense to see what happens with these changes and the things that we're continuing to work on with them before adding something that becomes a barrier to students.
Thanks. I think this is a tough call, and I really do appreciate the advisory committee and the staff's recommendation. I just want to ask two questions and then make one comment. Do it all quickly. One is, could you address or talk about, if you know, the difference between Bard Baltimore's admission criteria and other Bard schools, if you have that information? How does it differ? And I'll just ask the question. The second was this really seen as a binary choice of yes or no, or was there any effort to try to find some compromise that might allow the process to be somewhat informed by what is a concern by the school, but not let it approach what might be an admissions criteria, is the second question. And the third, on the higher proportion of seats with requirements, in a different action, we actually reduced the number of seats in Baltimore by reducing the cap in this case. So I'm not sure how that factor plays into the rationale for the disapproval.
Okay, and I may need you to help me remember all the questions so I don't forget each question. And I don't know if Bart is still here. Yeah, Claire is still here. So I feel like would be better able to talk about how their criteria are different from other Bard campuses. I know in other Bard campuses, they do consider like GPA. They get data from students. It's more akin to our existing selective schools in terms of their process. And I don't know.
Yeah, so we look at other places, GPA.
You can come up and be on the.
Yeah, so in our other schools, we review GPA, attendance, and we have the middle school transcripts. We can see behavior records, so we have a more holistic picture. So it varies by campus. We often don't have a cut score, but we review it. In some cases, we do. So we're modifying the process and trying to find the balance between sort of the program needs and the desire to be inclusive. And recommendation letters is another.
Was there any effort to find some middle ground that would allow the enrollment, the chronic the absenteeism inform the process, but not be a numeric part of the score?
Yeah, so Bart is a really good partner. We've been talking about all of their requests kind of over, and I think they refer to our ongoing conversations. So we've had a lot of kind of ongoing conversations about this. With attendance, I think the challenge is it will, once you know that, there's the potential for it to become discriminatory. So there's not really a way to kind of protect from that. Like we're not, even though we see the questions they may ask or materials, we're not there actually implementing it, right? And a lot of the challenges that they talk about in this particular request, as well as with the other ones, again, come down to school climate. So when you're talking about a challenge with students who are skipping school or who are cutting classes, right? There are two other requests that actually get at some of that, right? So the reduction in size, so there's a smaller ratio of staff to students, right? Helps with, getting the climate. They're having the typical struggles of a new school, a brand new school, right? So they're ending their first term as a school. So they're having those growing pains, and the work they're doing here is a little different than what they're doing in other places. And so there's a lot of things that we've been in conversation with them about in terms of really setting clear expectations for students around what is expected at Bard, what the climate is at Bard, and firming that up. And so because there's multiple requests that we're considering, this is one that would likely have a discriminatory impact on students. And part of their charge here in Baltimore is to really target students who are not coming from a college, the first generation would be first generation college students. So they're targeting, their work here is to target a harder population of students. And then the other thing is, like, when you're looking at middle school attendance, right, for many students, that's not really indicative of their ability to get to school. Some of that is indicative of a parent's ability to get you to school when we're looking at K-8s and middle grades. So there's a lot of things that go into that. And so I think before we add another kind of barrier to students, I think we should see how do these other things that we are putting in place and that they're putting in place work before we add another barrier.
fine. All right, any other questions? Commissioner,
Just a point of clarity. You said, one, you have the situation where the school population's going down. That's one factor you're dealing with. The other is the transfer situations you're working on. So you're not amenable to, at least your group is not amenable right now to engaging in this process. Say, once the other variables are fixed, a year from now, 2 years from now, would you be willing to revisit this, or you think it's purely discriminatory?
No, I mean, I think we want to be responsive to, we want the school to be successful. We want it to be inclusive of students. And so as a partner, we want to understand what the real challenges that the school is having and helping them to be successful. But they, and I get that their data is not the same as in other places, but their data, is high. They have a 90% grad or higher, I don't know the exact number right now, grad rate. 2/3 of their students are getting those college credits and AA degrees. So they're making a lot of big positive impact. I mean, and like from an anecdotal standpoint, or I think they would agree to this. But like in their early years, many of their most successful students were those chronically absent students. So I think we need to figure out what's happening. I think there's other things that we need to actually make sure they're put in place before we're erecting something that would be a barrier to a student.
all right, can I get a motion to approve 8.08? We are approving the admissions criteria request. So the conversations that we were having about the absenteeism, right? We're not considering that as a point of a kid getting into BARD, right? Say it again.
You're approving the staff recommendation.
I'm approving the staff's recommendation. Thank you for that. Exactly. That is correct. Are we all clear on what we're voting on? All right. I'd like a motion to approve 8.08. Moved by Commissioner James Hassan, second by Commissioner Brooks. All in favor?
McFadden.
Richardson? Okay. All right. So that is how many? 6? 6 approved. Any opposed? Any abstained? Okay, so 6 approved, 2 abstained, and 1 absent. It passes. All right. Next are our board committee reports. Is there a report from the Operations Committee, Commissioner Frank? There's no report. Policy Committee, Commissioner James Hassan?
I'm going to defer to Commissioner McFadden on this one.
Thank you, Dr. James Hassan. We discussed policy ACB last Tuesday, which is sex-based discrimination employees. That is the current title of it. We had some discussion around whether or not it is really 2 things that we're considering. Are we considering gender-based discrimination and sexual harassment? We had a pretty healthy conversation then. And Marcus Winder, I think, was the presenter. He's pretty new to our staff, but did a great job in presenting. So we still have some questions that we'll be in conversation with staff about. And since I'm here, teaching and learning did not meet due to inclement weather. But that meeting, we had planned to discuss discipline and suspensions update. We had some questions about that we sent over to staff. We received a few responses today that we'll send some things back for. We also talked about the summer 2019 evaluation of our summer learning program. We didn't talk about it, but that was supposed to be on there. Procurement, we had some items that we discussed tonight with Pearson. And our next meeting is February 4th, where we will discuss the curriculum approval for social studies. I was hoping that we could at least see some of that prior to the meeting on Tuesday. So hopefully maybe we'll be able to get that before Friday. And attendance strategy update, and then policy KRA, which deals with early learning.
Thank you, Commissioner McFadden. Would you like to give the notices of all of our upcoming meetings?
No.
And then there's that. Okay, so because you started us off, our upcoming teaching and learning meeting will be Tuesday, February the 4th at 3:30. We have an executive session Tuesday, February 11th, and that will start at 3 o'clock. And then we'll move into our public board meeting at 5 o'clock that day. Our operations committee meeting is Tuesday, February the 18th at 10:30 a.m. Our policy committee meeting is Tuesday, February the 18th at 3:30 p.m. And our parent and community advisory board meeting will be Thursday, February 20th at 6:30. Is there anything that anyone wants to add before we adjourn?
I do want to, Commissioner.
Sure.
Vice Chair, Baltimore Day in Annapolis is this coming Monday. For those that are planning to support, it's on. Those of us that can't hear. Those of us that are planning to support Baltimore and Annapolis on Monday, that is this coming Monday. And also, I want us to keep Commissioner Lynn in our thoughts and prayers. He's suffering from the flu, which a lot of folks right now are this season. So keep your hands clean and eat right so that we can kind of avoid. Say it again.
Go to Annapolis. The bus.
Okay. Can I get a motion to adjourn?
Okay.
Moved by Commissioner Brooks. Can I get a second?
Second.
Second by Commissioner McFadden. All in favor? That's 8 approved, 1 absent.